The secret is not about what you did, but about what you are. Everything you hold dear, the mortgage, the title, the silence in the car on the drive home, is an intricate, quiet illusion, woven across a truth too vast to face in the daylight. Tonight, we will look closer. There is a weight in your chest, a knowledge that your soul is older than the life you currently occupy. And that feeling of being trapped is only the gentle pressure of the infinite, trying to remember the shape of the key. Let the world outside fade to a whisper. It's time to open that lock. Chapter 1. If the anchor is the cage, who is the sailor who forgot how to depart? It is late now. The house has settled, and the silence that hangs in the air is not empty, but heavy with all the things you carried through the day. The weight of decisions, the geometry of the spreadsheet, the careful phrasing of an email you regretted sending before it was even delivered. It is the silence of a man who has played his part well, but has forgotten which lines were his own, and which were written by the stage he stands upon. You've built a life that looks, from the curb, exactly like the one you were taught to desire. Stability, provision, predictability. And yet, when you stand alone on the patio at this hour, or look out at the dark symmetry of the neighborhood, a single cold thought finds you. Is this it? It's a question not about the quality of the life, but the quality of the self living it. We spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week refining an external self. The professional, the provider, the patriarch. This self is a tool, perfectly adapted to the landscape of deadlines and dependencies. It's an engine designed to haul specific burdens. But it is not you. It is the anchor. And sometimes the anchor, buried deep and fixed fast to the seabed, begins to feel like the floor of a prison cell. Think about the moment you were handed a business card with your latest title, or signed a new contract on a house that required 2 decades of your future time. In those moments, you didn't just gain a thing. You gained a new, heavier identity. You took on a name that someone else, a company, a bank, society, uses to define your utility. And slowly, subtly, the being that exists beneath the skin, the one who looks at the stars and feels a profound, almost painful longing for somewhere else, gets quieter and quieter. It's the sailor, silenced by the steady, metallic clang of the cage he mistook for a hull. The irony of this midlife stillness is that the very things intended to grant freedom, security, defined role, wealth, have become the chains of expectation. The expectation to keep delivering, to keep the ship stable, to never show a weakness that might threaten the whole beautiful, complex structure. This is the great, quiet trap of physical existence. Mistaking the container for the contained. You believe you are defined by what you do, or what you own, or what you failed to do. But metaphysics whispers a different secret. It suggests that all of these roles are temporary weather patterns, passing over a permanent mountain. That mountain, that true, irreducible, foundational I am, is the sailor. He hasn't gone anywhere. He has simply been listening to the noise of the anchor chain too long. He's forgotten the pure, simple fact of his own existence is enough, without the need for an external modifier. To recognize this true self is not a dramatic, sudden break. It is a slow, gentle withdrawal of allegiance from the cage. It is the realization that the anxiety you feel, the low-level static of stress about the next meeting, the next expense, the next necessary performance, is not an anxiety about you, but an anxiety about the role. The role can fail. The job can disappear. The home can change hands. But the essential consciousness observing those changes, that is the part that cannot be fired, cannot be replaced, and cannot be diminished by loss. It is the eternal witness. Try to remember a time before you were the CFO, the father, the husband, the provider. Not a memory of childhood, but a memory of pure awareness. That quiet moment between two thoughts, before you assigned a name or a label to the feeling. When you allow yourself to step out of the heavy armor of your professional and social identity, you find a stillness that is not the stillness of exhaustion, but the stillness of power. It's the moment the sailor realizes the anchor is not shackled to his ankle. It's merely resting on the deck. And the moment he chooses, he can simply hoist it and set a new bearing. The true self, the metaphysical self, does not need motivation, because it is the source of all motivation. It does not need purpose, because it is the fundamental ground from which all purposes spring. Your task tonight is not to fix the life outside, but to stop identifying with the life you are supposed to be living. Let the weight of the day settle. Let the titles and the responsibilities peel away like old paint. What remains right here, right now, in the stillness, is the irreducible thing that has watched every sunrise of your life and knows exactly how to set sail. You are not trapped. You are merely practicing the art of stillness until you remember your own, quiet, infinite freedom. But before we leave this thought behind, there's one more silence worth listening to. The silence that follows a decision made long ago. It's the silence where regret takes shape. Chapter 2. Does the past only exist as unpaid debt, or as a compass hidden in the future? We all carry the ledger. It's an invisible, leather-bound book tucked under the arm of our spirit, filled with figures that don't add up. The career turn we missed. The word we should have spoken. The word we wish we could take back. The entire middle section of life often feels like a long, slow attempt to balance this book, to pay off the emotional debt accrued by our younger, less cautious self. This is where the linearity of time, the idea that it moves only forward, like a river you can never step into twice, becomes a spiritual burden. If time is only a straight line, then every past mistake is a fixed data point, a permanent scar on the record. It defines our limit. It becomes the reason we are here, instead of there. But metaphysics rarely agrees with the clock on the wall. If you were to ask a physicist about time, they might tell you it is merely a dimension, like space. But the storyteller in you knows it's more personal than that. Time is the felt pressure of consciousness moving through change. And the past, the regretted moment, the missed opportunity, the chance for a different identity, doesn't actually exist back there, in a dusty attic of history. The past only exists here, right now, in the form of the memory, and the emotional charge you assign to it. Think of a missed promotion 15 years ago. The anger, the sense of failure, the internal narrative that followed. I'm not ambitious enough. I wasn't smart enough. I shouldn't have been so silent. That narrative is the unpaid debt. It's a phantom limb of identity that continues to ache. If you don't engage the metaphysical perspective, the past remains a debt because you allow the event to be the fixed definition of your capacity. You let the younger self's mistake become the current self's limitation. But what if the past, instead of being a debt, is simply raw, unrefined energy? Imagine a choice you regretted. That choice created a divergence. The life you have now is the result of that initial turn. But the life you didn't choose, the path that feels like purpose lost, didn't just vanish. It folded back into the field of possibilities, waiting. The feeling of purpose loss that haunts you in the suburbs, the quiet dread that you chose comfort over calling, is not a failure to live a past life. It is the unexpended energy of that possibility. trying to communicate with your present self. It is not a debt owed to the past. It is a compass hidden in the future, pointing to the next, necessary divergence. When you look back at regret, try to see it not as a mistake, but as a lesson in pure preference. That feeling of, "I wish I had chosen differently," is the purest form of self-knowledge. It tells you exactly what the true, fundamental sailor wants. It defines your value system. Without the noise of current circumstance, the energy of the past is what propels us. A debt shackles us to the old action. A compass reorients us toward a new, more truthful one. To transform the debt into a compass, you simply have to change the question you ask when you look back. Instead of, "Why did I fail?" ask, "What did that failure teach my deepest self about what I value now?" The past becomes a future-forming tool. When you extract the truth from the event is over. The truth, the pure knowledge that I require more creative freedom, or I must not sacrifice integrity for convenience. That truth is eternal and absolutely portable. The universe, in its deep, gentle symmetry, is not punishing you for old choices. It is simply showing you, through the sustained ache of regret, the precise vector correction required to align your true self with the world around you. The path forward is often illuminated by the light we thought we had lost behind us. Allow the events of the past to lose their emotional charge. They are data points, nothing more. Their only power comes from the meaning you keep assigning to them in the present moment. Let the pen drop from the ledger. Let the book close. The road ahead is not paved by perfect decisions, but by the quiet, steady courage to follow the hidden compass that your own, perfectly realized regret has provided. You are exactly where you need to be, because only from this point can you see the full architecture of your choices and choose, finally, not to repeat the past, but to redirect its unspent power. This is how the future redeems the past, simply by using its energy to power a new intention. We have addressed the fixed self and the linear nature of time, but there is a final, profound riddle that haunts the space between all of us, the quiet distance we feel, even when we are not alone. Chapter 3. Is the quiet distance between us a wall, or just the echo of a single thought? It is the familiar tragedy of modern life, the suburban loneliness. You are surrounded by people, family, neighbors, colleagues, yet the essential conversation remains unspoken. You hear the small noises of your household, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a passing car, and you feel the immense, quiet weight of being an island. We look at others and see separate, self-contained narratives. Each person is a lighthouse, a singular beam of consciousness, operating on its own clock, following its own private rules, projecting a carefully curated light. And between these lighthouses, we perceive vast, dark water. The distance. This perceived separation is perhaps the most paralyzing metaphysical illusion we experience. It gives rise to all the quiet conflicts, the inability to explain the stress you feel, the choice to remain silent about a deep fear, the feeling that your identity loss is a burden you cannot share without being misunderstood. If we are all entirely separate, sovereign entities, then connection is always a heroic, difficult act, and loneliness is the default condition. The distance is a wall. But what if the reality is far gentler, far more intimate? What if the distance is not the absence of connection, but merely the echo of a single, sustained thought? The metaphysical view suggests that consciousness is not generated by the separate brain, but that the brain acts as a receiver, tuning into one universal, singular field of awareness. Imagine a large lake at night. When you drop a stone into it, a ripple begins. That ripple is your unique experience, your life story, your personality. But the water itself, the substance that is rippling, is the same water that makes up every other ripple, every other lake, every other ocean. The quiet distance you feel between yourself and your family across the hall, or between yourself and the colleague you barely tolerate, is the moment you forget the water and only focus on the unique pattern of the ripple. The wall we perceive is built from three simple things: fear of judgment, the belief that your internal ripple, your private feeling, your unsorted thought, is fundamentally different, strange, or unworthy of the other person's understanding. The ego barrier, the sailor's insistence on being a unique, separate ship, fearing that dissolving into the shared ocean means losing identity. The illusion of time, the reliance on past history to define a relationship, instead of seeing every moment as a fresh connection to the shared source. When you sit in the silence, feeling that suburban isolation, remember this: the air you breathe, the molecules that make up your body, the fundamental energy that keeps your heart beating, is the exact same unbroken substance that sustains every other person. There is no empty space between you. There is only substance. The concept of separation is a practical tool. It allows you to drive your own car, manage your own schedule, and experience a unique perspective. But it is not the ultimate truth of your existence. The moment you cease fighting the distance and simply accept the quiet fact of your shared awareness, something softens. You don't have to explain your burdens to someone else for them to be understood, because at the deepest level, they already are understood. The struggle for purpose, the ache of regret, the crushing weight of responsibility, these are not unique to you. They are the universal echoes within the single, grand thought we call human experience. This shift in perception is not about achieving some dramatic, public communion. It's a private, gentle realignment. It's the realization that when you feel lonely, you are merely feeling the vast, echoing space of the whole that you are temporarily attempting to occupy as a part. When you look at another person, you are not looking at a stranger with a separate script. You are looking at a different shaped ripple in the same water. You are looking at a different version of the sailor, who also forgot he could depart. Let this thought be the final release of the night. You are not alone. You cannot be alone. Your awareness is simply a focused beam of the universal, and in that, there is profound rest. There is no wall, only the shared, sustaining quiet. Let the gentle certainty of this shared essence melt the tension from your shoulders, and let your awareness drift, not into an end, but back into the immense, soft field from which it emerged. It is always there, and you are always held. Chapter 4. If the key to the labyrinth is already in your pocket, why do you still believe the walls are solid? There is a sound the house makes when everyone else has finally settled. It's not the wind or the distant traffic. It is the sound of the house breathing, the weight of its own existence settling back onto the foundation. This is the moment, just before the deepest part of the night, when the world stops demanding and only waits. This is the perfect silence to ask about the walls. You know the feeling of being trapped. It might be the walls of the cubicle farm, the drywall of the suburban mortgage, or the unspoken boundaries of a marriage built on quiet compromise. It feels solid, doesn't it? Concrete and cold, like a lock you didn't see closing. But tonight, let's consider a gentler, more frightening truth. The labyrinth isn't made of stone. It's made of conviction. We spend our lives building things, mostly invisible. We build systems of belief around money, loyalty, regret, and success. We accept the map we were handed at 25, and even now, decades later, we assume the territories haven't shifted. We assume the path marked career must lead to contentment, even as we stand here, hands dirty, looking up at a sky that feels perpetually overcast. The key we're talking about, the one already heavy in the pocket of your worn jacket, is the understanding that perception creates dimension. The walls of your current trap are held up, not by steel, but by your continuous, daily decision to honor the rules of the prison. Think of the obligations that weigh heaviest. That job you hate, which you stay in for the family. The debt you carry, which you tell yourself defines your stability. The silence you keep, which you mistake for strength. These are not immovable boulders. They are agreements. And every agreement has an escape clause, one written in the small print of your own free will. Metaphysics simply asks, what if the weight you feel is the mass of your own unexamined habits? Imagine standing in your own garage, late. The smell of oil and gasoline hangs heavy, familiar. You look at the car, the thing that carries you every day from the cage to the shelter. What if, for all those trips, you never once checked to see if the driver's side door was truly locked? You just assumed it was, because that's what a door is supposed to be. The profound exhaustion of midlife, that deep, settled weariness, often comes less from the effort of pushing against the walls, and more from the strain of constantly reaffirming them. We are so afraid of the terrifying freedom on the other side of the fence, the instability, the unknown purpose, that we prefer the safety of predictable misery. The trap, then, is a refuge. It is time to feel the key. It's cool, perhaps a little tarnished, and shaped exactly like the courage to ask, why? Why must I keep this schedule? Why must I accept this evaluation of my worth? Why did I allow a title on a business card to replace the definition of the man I meant to become? The walls of a true labyrinth should crumble if you stop believing they are solid. This doesn't mean your life instantaneously changes, but the felt reality of your confinement dissolves. The job becomes a task, not an identity. The stress becomes an event, not a permanent state of being. Take a breath, slow and deep. Feel the air move. We often confuse the need for security with the need for certainty. Security is having a roof and food. Certainty is telling yourself that you must have the roof and food exactly this way, through exactly this pain, until the end of time. That need for certainty, that refusal to live with ambiguity, is the mortar between the stones of your self-imposed prison. The great philosophers knew that the only truly solid object in the universe is the moment you are currently experiencing. Everything else, past, future, consequence, reputation, is an idea, a projection, or a memory. They are ghosts in the machine. If you are 40 or 50 or 60, you have accumulated enough evidence to know the maps are flawed. You have seen successful people crash and quiet people flourish. You have watched your own identity shift drastically without your permission. You have survived things you thought would end you. You are, in short, an expert in the elasticity of reality. The key doesn't unlock a door. It unlocks your assumption about the nature of the wood. The walls of regret, the things you didn't say, the chances you didn't take, are perhaps the strongest of all. But even those are built on the premise that the past is fixed. Metaphysically, the past is only ever a story being told in the present. If you change the storyteller, the walls change color, texture, and height. Tonight, let the conviction that you are trapped soften just a little. Allow the walls around your job, your role, your anxiety to become translucent. You don't have to escape yet. Just see through them. See the field on the other side, the uncertain light, the terrifying invitation to simply be without a label. The heaviest chains are the ones you forget you forged yourself, link by quiet link, over decades of adherence to invisible social contracts. The key is permission. The permission to be tired of the performance. The permission to admit the certainty you bought wasn't worth the price. The permission to depart, even if it's only an inch, into a truer version of yourself. The moment you accept the possibility that the barrier is simply a shadow, the shadow loses its force. The walls become porous. They become less like stone, and more like a heavy curtain you could simply push aside. But before we leave this thought behind, there's one more silence worth listening to. The silent verdict of the years we should have had, and the nature of the time that measures their absence. Chapter 5. Does the clock tick forward, or does it only measure the empty space left behind by the choices we didn't make? We live our lives obsessed with the ticking. The deadlines, the mortgage term, the years until retirement, the calendar marking the inevitable march from birth toward final silence. We use time as currency, as weapon, as measure of success and failure. But what if the clock is wrong? What if it's not a generator of movement, but merely a sensitive instrument that records what isn't there? Does the clock tick forward, or does it only measure the empty space left behind by the choices we didn't make? This is the question that sits on the chest of every man who has woken up at 50 and realized the scenery outside the window is not the landscape he signed up for. The metaphysics of regret is complex because it relies on the belief that another, better life actually exists somewhere, just out of reach. But where is that unlived life? Is it a solid, shimmering reality in a parallel dimension? Or is it simply a perfect sculpture carved from the absence of your courage in a defining moment? We can spend hours dissecting the one big choice, the job offer we declined, the girl we let walk away, the risk we refused to take on the business. But the accumulation of empty spaces is much more subtle. It's the thousands of times you chose silence over truth, the countless evenings you chose exhaustion over presence, the perpetual choosing of the known comfort over the frightening, generative chaos. Each one of those small refusals leaves a tiny vacuum, and the clock, that tireless historian, simply adds up the empty spaces. Consider the notion that the future isn't a pre-existing road you are walking toward. It is, instead, a dense fog. Every choice you make, every word you speak, every hand you shake, every refusal you offer, is a tiny spark of light that pushes the fog back, revealing a single path. The clock doesn't tick to the future. It ticks from the density of the unchosen, converting potential into history. The feeling of stuckness that poisons midlife often stems from this accumulation of no. We are carrying the entire weight of all the lives we implicitly said no to. Think of the energy required to hold back your true opinions in a meeting for 10 years. The mental exhaustion of suppressing your desire to quit the corporate grind and build a simple life by the water. That energy doesn't disappear. It turns inward, becoming the silent, compressive force of a life defined by negation. Tonight, try a new accounting. Don't look at the choices you made. Look at the potential energy of the choices you denied. The life where you were a poet. Where is that man now? His absence is a specific weight, a specific quality of silence in your current apartment. The life where you stood up to your father. The fact that you didn't is a specific tension in your shoulders right now. When we feel trapped, We often believe we are victims of circumstance. But metaphysically, we are often just the caretakers of a vast museum dedicated to our own cowardice. The ceiling is low because we chose to duck at the doorway, and we have never stood fully upright since. The tragedy is not the loss of the unlived life, but the failure to learn from its ghost. The empty spaces are not failures, they are directional markers. They tell you precisely what your soul still craves. If the poet within you creates a heavy vacuum, then the lesson is that you desperately need to reintegrate beauty and expression into your concrete existence. If the absence of the fearless adventurer feels like a cold draft, it means your current life is too safe, too buffered, too predictable. This is the hidden wisdom of the clock. It doesn't judge, it simply reports the difference between the man you are and the man you could have been. That difference is the engine of midlife restlessness. We are terrified of the emptiness because we associate it with death. But the spiritual tradition suggests that emptiness is the vessel of possibility. The space left behind by the denied choice is not a void. It's an invitation. It's the raw clay waiting for the new sculptor. Tonight, let go of the idea of catching up. You can't rewind the clock to retrieve the perfect life, but you can start choosing differently in the very next breath. When you look at your children or your partner, and you feel that familiar stress, that moment when the words stick in your throat, that is the precise moment when you are generating the next empty space. The choice is always there. Say the difficult, true thing, or generate another layer of regret. The clock doesn't care. It will keep measuring the distance between the two. We have a finite number of decisions left. We cannot afford to waste them creating more absences. The only way to stop the relentless accounting of the unlived is to start choosing the path that feels most vibrant and true, even if it makes the current, comfortable structure groan and shift. It is never too late to use the emptiness you carry as a fuel source. The choices you didn't make have given you a master class in your own true desires. Honor those ghosts, not by mourning them, but by finally living in the direction they point. The second hand sweeps past. It is silent. It doesn't move forward. It only moves away from the last perfect moment of pure potential. Stop measuring absence and start filling the silence with action. We have explored the illusion of our walls and the silent accounting of our time. But there is a final, quieter question about the very foundation of who we are, the silent cost of living a life dictated by noise. Chapter 6. What fading blueprint governs the shape of the man who only ever listened to the engine noise? There is a particular kind of silence that falls when the car engine, finally, clicks off in the driveway. The door is closed, the lights are out, and for a split second, you are suspended between the noise of the day. The emails, the calls, the arguments, the relentless hum of ambition, and the quiet weight of coming home. In that brief, pure stillness, who are you? If we define ourselves by what we do, the job title, the provider role, the endless, necessary transactions of existence, then we are constantly listening to the engine noise, the sound of production, acceleration, and maintenance. But the deeper self, the one that was there before the keys were turned in the ignition, operates by a different design. It operates from a fading blueprint, a gentle, original drawing of the soul, before the world started sketching over it in thick, permanent marker. The problem of purpose loss in midlife is often the crisis of realizing you have successfully lived out someone else's plan. You followed the directions for the assembly of a successful man, found in a dusty old instruction manual. You achieved the shape dictated by the cultural noise. But the shape doesn't fit the original blueprint of your spirit. Think of the engine noise as the sound of all external validation. It's the roar of the meeting room applause, the quiet approval of the neighborhood, the relieved sigh of the bank. It's the necessary sound of movement in the world. But if you listen to it exclusively, you miss the quiet, almost invisible crackle of your own internal navigation system. That fading blueprint. It's not a list of accomplishments. It is a set of essential textures, a preference for silence, a deep need for creative expression, a capacity for fierce loyalty to a forgotten ideal, a unique, almost childlike curiosity about a narrow subject. When was the last time you consciously consulted that original design? Was it when you were 16, staring at the ceiling and imagining a life that had nothing to do with compound interest? Was it when you chose your college major based on what your father suggested, rather than the subject that made your hands tremble with excitement? The tragedy of the man who only listens to the engine noise is that his internal life, his true dimension, gets shrunk down to the size of the glove compartment. He becomes proficient at function, but hollow in essence. He can solve complex logistical problems at work, but he cannot tell his son the truth about why he's unhappy. He can provide security, but he cannot provide the deep, strange music of his own soul. He is a perfectly polished vessel with no wine. This leads to the suburban loneliness, the silence that is not peaceful, but deafening. It is the loneliness of being fully known in function, but completely unknown in essence. You look around at the house, the family, the accumulation, and the blueprint whispers, "This is good, but is it you?" The metaphysics of being suggests that you are not the sum of your actions, but the silence beneath them, the space between the words, the pause after the engine noise stops. We need the noise to operate. We need the structure. But if we mistake the structure for the self starves. How do you find the fading blueprint? You have to move toward the opposite of the noise. You have to find a quiet corner of the house, or the garage, or a lakeside dock, and sit until you can hear the sound of your own dust settling. Not the dust of the day, but the dust of all the performances you've given. You have to listen past the anxiety, past the to-do list, past the phantom ring of the phone. And when the deep, low hum of your own true identity starts to vibrate, it will not be a command. It will be a small, almost apologetic question. Do you still remember this shape? Do you still remember what I asked you to build? The engine noise is constant external pressure, shaping you into the most useful, most manageable version of yourself for the collective. The blueprint is the quiet, insistent force that wants to shape you into the most authentic, most fully realized version of yourself, for you alone. It requires tremendous discipline in middle age to abandon usefulness for authenticity. It means risking the comfort you've built. It means acknowledging the deep disappointment you harbor in yourself. But the moment you start honoring the original design, the noise becomes background music, rather than the conductor of your existence. Start small. What is the one thing you discarded 20 years ago that still calls to you? A book, a guitar, a language. That is a filament of the blueprint. Reconnect it. This journey is not about blowing up your life. It is about quietly, methodically, tracing the original outline of your soul, until the shape becomes solid again, until the man who walks from the car and turns off the engine is the same man who walks into the quiet house. Let the weight of the day, the noise, the demands, the performance, drift away. You are more than your output. You are more than the engine. You are the deep, quiet, original design, waiting to be rediscovered. Let that silence enter you now, slow and deep. There is nothing left to do, only to be. The night is quiet, and the blueprint is waiting. Chapter 7. Is the quiet weight of certainty just the unread language of chaos? There is a moment, late at night, when the silence becomes so heavy that it stops feeling empty and starts feeling full. It's the sound of everything you believe to be true. The mortgage, the title on the door, the name you answer to, settling like dust on glass. You're certain of these things. You built them. You pay for them. They are the fixed points in your personal cosmology. But certainty is often just a highly specialized form of blindness. It's the comfortable assumption that the blueprint on the table is the same as the house standing in the storm. We spend decades seeking certainty. We choose the predictable path, the steady paycheck, the same route home, until the days begin to stack up like identical, unread books. This is the architecture of the midlife mind, a heavy, structured fortress built to keep the unpredictable, the uncontrollable, at bay. And yet, if you listen closely to that heavy silence, you can sometimes hear the faint, slow breath of something else. The deep, ancient resonance of chaos. Not chaos as violence or destruction, but chaos as possibility. Chaos as the unwritten chapter of the universe. The metaphysical truth is that the world you perceive, the world that imposes the weight of certainty upon you, is inherently fluid. It is a vast, humming, vibrating field of energy, and your carefully constructed reality is merely the thin, polished surface tension on top of that ocean. Think about the feeling of being trapped. It's a certainty. The four walls of the office. The predictable argument. The knowledge that next Tuesday will be exactly like the last. But what if the very solidity of those walls is an agreement you unknowingly signed years ago? What if the key to the door you can't open isn't about forcing the lock, but about recognizing that the lock itself is an illusion, a convention of the world you decided was certain? The certainty of a man's life is often defined by his regrets. They are the solid, historical facts. I should have taken that job. I should have said yes. I should have said no. These regrets are anchors made of certainty, holding you precisely in the place you tried to leave. But chaos speaks a different language. It whispers that the past isn't a fixed, brittle artifact. It's a constantly re-editing story, dependent on the present moment's perception. If you peel back the layers of your most stressful day, what do you find? You find the certainty of obligation, the certainty of expectation. You are certain that if you fail to hold up your section of the ceiling, everything collapses. That is the architecture of being trapped. But outside that architecture, running like an electrical current beneath the floorboards, is the unread language of chaos. The unread language suggests that perhaps the ceiling doesn't need to be held up at all. Perhaps the entire structure is resting on something far more resilient than your tired shoulders. Imagine the universe not as a ticking clock, but as an enormous, silent library of potential futures. The path you are on, the certain path, is just one heavily worn track through the stacks. But the metaphysical reality is that all the other books, all the unchosen paths, the forgotten identities, the bold, terrifying options, exist right now. They are just layered upon your current reality, separated only by the frequency of your perception. When we talk about the suburban loneliness that can settle in the heart of a successful man, it's the loneliness of certainty. He is certain of his role, his neighborhood, his routine. The world is settled, and in that settlement, the vibrancy drains out. Nothing is new because everything is known. The invitation of chaos isn't to burn the house down. It is simply to look at the house with different eyes. To notice the way the light falls through the window, not as a familiar event, but as an impossible, daily miracle of photons defying gravity. To see your own hand not as a tool for signing checks, but as a structure of bone and tendon that took billions of years of cosmic history to perfect. This is the beginning of reading the unread language. It's the moment the mind steps back from the content of its certainty, the what, the when, the how, and begins to marvel at the fact of existence itself. What happens when a man stops being certain of who he is supposed to be? He begins to unravel the tightly woven threads of his identity, threads that were spun out of external pressures and the perceived expectations of others. He finds a space, a quiet, humming void behind the mask of the provider, the boss, the capable one, and in that void there is no fixed identity, only pure, shape-shifting potential. That is chaos in its most gentle form, the freedom to be rewritten. This freedom is terrifying because it means admitting that the decades spent building the fortress might have been, in a way, unnecessary. It means that the stress you carried, the silent, grinding tension in your jaw, was mostly just the friction created by forcing a fluid reality into a rigid, certain container. The great secret of the metaphysical journey is that the greatest act of control is actually the greatest act of surrender. When you let go of the rigid necessity of certainty, the universe, which is pure, benevolent chaos, steps in to fill the void with more meaningful possibilities. It's the difference between trying to paddle a small canoe upstream against a certain current and simply drifting out into a vast, silent sea where every direction is simply forward. To feel less trapped, you don't need a map or a destination. You need to stop believing the ground you stand on is permanent. You need to start listening to the faint, continuous murmur of the unread language, the sound of all the things that could be, vibrating right alongside the one thing that is. It is the gentle rocking of the universe, and in its rhythm, your own heartbeat can finally slow down and match the pace of the infinite. But before we leave this thought behind, there's one more silence worth listening to, a stillness hidden deep within the consequences of every breath we take. Chapter 8. If every moment is already forgiven, why does the burden of choice still feel like stone? Let's turn the light low now, until the room feels less like a room and more like a quiet vessel drifting on water. In this space, we confront the deepest weight a man carries, the accumulated density of his choices. This is where job regret festers, where the word left unsaid becomes a tumor of silence, where the feeling of being trapped is codified in the decisions made years ago. You carry this burden like a stone in your coat pocket. You know exactly how heavy it is, and you check for it constantly. But what if the ledger is already balanced? What if the universe operates not on a system of accumulation and penalty, but on a system of continuous, automatic, and absolute forgiveness? This is the central paradox of free will when viewed through a metaphysical lens. The illusion of a linear, judgmental timeline, past choice equals present consequence, is what creates the crushing weight. We operate under the certainty that we can screw things up permanently. However, the deep, underlying truth is that time is not a river flowing from the past to the future. It is a vast, simultaneous ocean. Every version of you, the young man full of purpose, the man struggling with family stress, the man reading this now, exists right now. And if every moment exists simultaneously, how can one point in time condemn another? In this eternal now, every outcome is simply a necessary color in the vast, complete painting. And if everything is necessary, then everything is, by definition, forgiven. Think of your most agonizing choice, the career path rejected, the emotional retreat during a family crisis, the crucial word you couldn't find. You revisit these moments, trying to correct them in retrospect, trying to lessen the stone's weight. But the weight isn't in the choice itself. It's in the conviction that the choice was wrong. If the universe has already factored in that wrongness as an essential part of the design, if the tapestry of your life requires that dark thread to make the gold threads shine, then the only lingering burden is the one you insist on carrying. The suburban loneliness we spoke of, that feeling of being an island in a sea of shared lawns, often stems from the rigidity of a choice-made identity. I chose this house, this car, this quiet life. Now I must be this man. This is the stone. But the moment is already forgiven. The moment you chose the quiet house, the universe did not close the door on the wild life. It simply shelved it for a while. You are not trapped by the choices you made. You are trapped by the ones you refuse to unmake in your mind. The deep, unsettling purpose loss that accompanies midlife isn't a lack of a future path. It's the realization that the old, concrete purpose, the one built from ambition and certainty, was hollow. The new purpose, the authentic one, can only emerge in the space cleared by forgiveness. To forgive the moment is to recognize that the choice you made led you, perfectly, to this quiet room tonight. And this quiet room is the only necessary starting point for whatever comes next. Let's look at the feeling of job regret. It is a constant internal battle against an irreversible past. But what if the wrong job was metaphysically necessary to teach you the value of silence, the weight of obligation, or the deep, yearning hunger for something real? These lessons are far more valuable than any career title. The career choice wasn't about the job. It was about gathering the necessary ingredients for your current consciousness. And if it served that purpose, it was, by definition, the right choice. The heaviness you feel is the human-imposed judgment layered upon a cosmic neutrality. The universe doesn't judge the path of the raindrop from the cloud to the sea. It simply flows. And you, too, are an expression of that flow. You are the raindrop carrying the temporary memory of the cloud, but you are destined for the ocean. To feel the stone of choice dissolve, you must practice a radical act of forgiveness toward your past self. That man, operating with incomplete information, stress, and external pressure, did the best he could with the tools he had. He was not deficient. He was simply human, and the system of reality already accounted for his humanity. Imagine trying to build a complex, beautiful machine. If you judge every misplaced screw, every dropped hammer, as a failure, you will never finish. But the master engineer knows that the scattered materials, the scrapped parts, and the occasional mistake are all part of the necessary, glorious process of creation. They are already accounted for in the budget of time and effort. They are forgiven before they are even made. The peace you seek is not earned by changing your past. It is found by accepting that the version of yourself who made those choices is already worthy. His flaws and detours are the texture of his truth. They are the scars that make his presence in the world unique. Metaphysical forgiveness is not a pardon given by an outside authority. It is the deep realization that you are not separate from the source of creation. And the source of creation can only create what is needed. If you needed the stress, the pressure, the suburban silence, and the purpose lost to bring you to this quiet, introspective moment, then every step, however circuitous, was perfect. The burden lifts when the mind stops arguing with the past. The stone dissolves when you realize that the man who made the choices and the man who forgives them are one and the same, and that this true, core self is utterly untouched by the temporary roles and regrettable actions of the surface-level identity. You are the deep water, and the choices are just the ripples on the surface. The deep water remains still, clear, and perfectly unburdened. This is the stillness of acceptance. But acceptance can lead us to the edges of ourselves. And now we must ask, after the roles have been shed and the burden of history released, what remains of the man himself? Chapter 9. Where does the man go when the echo of his own name finally fades? The light is almost gone now, and the room has fully surrendered to the night. It's time to talk about identity, not the identity others see, but the core essence that persists even when the theater of your life is empty. A man's name is his first, heaviest definition. It is the label placed on the product, the title carved into the marble. It calls him to appointments, demands his performance, and carries the heavy history of his father and his grandfather. When you hear your name called in the chaos of a busy day, you instantly snap back into your role, the responsible one, the provider, the boss. But sometimes, when you are quiet like this, the sound of your own name feels hollow. It feels like a costume that no longer quite fits, or a suit jacket left on the back of a chair. The echo of your own name begins to fade. Where does the man go when he steps out of that echo? He goes to the quiet place, the space of true identity, the self that existed before the first expectation was ever whispered into the cradle. Metaphysically, this is the unconditioned self, the pure awareness that is aware of the name, but is not contained by it. Midlife, with its crushing stress and existential crises, is often the universe's way of forcing this separation. It takes the things you used to define yourself by, the career title, the strength of your back, the certainty of your expertise, and gently, sometimes violently, removes them. This isn't punishment, it's a purification. It is making space for the true, vast, quiet self to emerge. When the echo of your name fades, the suburban loneliness that haunts you transforms. You realize the loneliness wasn't a distance between you and your neighbor. It was the distance between you and the truth of who you are. The man who is defined by his role is always lonely, because he is fundamentally unavailable to himself. He is always on shift. But the man who realizes the role is temporary, and the self is eternal, begins to fill that loneliness with an immense, quiet solitude. It is the feeling of coming home to a house that is always warm, always available, and requires no performance. We build our identity out of external friction. We are defined by what we push against, the market, the deadlines, the family demands. But the true self is frictionless. It is simply the capacity to witness. Imagine you are standing in a vast, old cathedral. The name on the door, the job title, the family stress. Those are the stained glass windows. They are beautiful, necessary, and full of color. But the true self is the light that pours through them. The light is never scratched, never stained, and never changes. No matter how chaotic the image on the glass becomes, the fading echo is a liberation. It means the end of the identity crisis, which is always the crisis of trying to fit an infinite consciousness into a finite set of labels. You were never meant to be just the title you earned. You were meant to be the infinite source, from which the ability to earn the title sprang. This core self, this unconditioned identity, has no regrets and carries no burden of choice. It is the space of absolute, pure potential we called chaos earlier, now turned inward. It is the place where your purpose loss evaporates, because the deep, true purpose of your being is not to do anything, but simply to be the quiet awareness that experiences the phenomenon of life. The pressure to find yourself in midlife is a flawed question. You cannot find what has never been lost. You can only gently peel away the layers of what you are not. Let the thought of your work ego fade. That demanding voice that tells you your worth is tied to your productivity. Let it go. That was an important tool for a time, a well-forged axe. But you are not the axe. You are the forest that grew the wood. Let the thought of your parental stress fade, the feeling of needing to control every outcome for your children. Let it go. That was a deep and necessary fire of love. But you are not the heat. You are the source of the flame that never goes out. When the name fades, what remains is an astonishing, simple fact. I am here. I am aware. This awareness is the only true constant, the fixed point that never moved, even as you raced through decades of work and worry. To rest in this true identity is to know a peace that cannot be disturbed by the stock market, the silence in the kitchen, or the decisions of the past. Because the self that remains is timeless, whole, and perfectly sufficient. It is the man, finally standing quiet and alone, watching the stars he has always been made of. This man is immense. He is finally free of the small, temporary box he was asked to live in. There is nothing left to do now, but to sink into this profound, quiet awareness. The world is fine without your conscious effort for a few hours. The choices are all forgiven. The roles are safely resting on the chair. You are simply the light, resting in the light. And for this timeless moment, that is all you need to be. Chapter 10. When the mask fuses to the face, does the original man still remember his own weather? Take a moment. Feel the presence of the room around you, the temperature of the air, the distant hum of the world continuing its motion, even as you find your own stillness. This moment, this quiet holding, is where the deepest questions live. They don't shout. They just wait. Like a letter you knew you wrote, but forgot to mail. Tonight, we begin by looking at the man you put away for safekeeping. We all build a working self, don't we? We call it professionalism, or responsibility, or being the rock. It's the face you wear in the office when the merger hits a snag. The steady voice you use when a child is worried. The quiet, uncomplaining strength you show on Saturday morning when the gutters need clearing. And the last thing you want to do is climb a ladder. It starts as a strategy, a simple, useful tool, a mask, if you will, crafted meticulously from expectations and necessity. It's well made, solid, dependable. It serves a profound purpose. It protects the tender, uncertain core beneath it. It ensures that the world gets what it needs, and you, in turn, get the quiet satisfaction of a life delivered, as promised. But when you pass 50, or 45, or even just 35, the curious thing happens. That mask you fashioned from plaster and pride starts to feel less like a tool you pick up, and more like a skin you can't shed. It's fused. The man beneath the mask, the original man, begins to feel distant. You can barely recall his private weather. Was he a man of sudden storms, or long, meditative calms? Did he prefer the salty air of the ocean, or the dense, damp quiet of the forest? Did he ever spend an afternoon just watching the clouds move, with no agenda, no return on investment, no task list waiting? Somewhere in the relentless cycle of mortgage, career, and commitment, the boundaries blurred. The role became the reality. The provider became the man. And the man who existed before the provision was needed, well, he was quietly retired. The cost of maintaining this perfect, static face is enormous. It's the silent tension that pulls at your jaw when you're alone in the car after a long day. It's the inexplicable exhaustion that settles deeper than simple lack of sleep. Because you're not just tired from working, you're tired from performing. You're tired from constantly holding the perimeter, ensuring the structure, the suburban house, the successful career, the stable family unit, remains standing. It's the loneliness of the man who can't truly be seen, because his own chosen costume is too opaque. When was the last time you allowed yourself to be utterly, inconveniently transparent, even to yourself? Not just acknowledging a weakness, but feeling the raw, unedited impulse of the man who used to dream of different harbors. The key to metaphysics, sometimes, isn't finding a cosmic truth outside of you, but finding the forgotten primal truth inside you. It's the recognition that you are not the job title, not the debt owed, not the square footage of the garage. These are all temporary environments. You are the consciousness that watches the man in the mask. Think of those late nights, sitting in the dark kitchen. The house is silent. The email pings have stopped. You're nursing a glass of water, or maybe just staring at the reflection in the dark window. In that moment, a quiet voice surfaces, usually just a single word. Who? That is the original man knocking. He's not angry. He's just curious. He wants to know if you remember him, the one who wasn't worried about the quarterly report, but was obsessed with the idea of building a boat, or mastering a lost language, or simply sitting silently on a hilltop until he felt less like a man and more like a tree. The true self, the metaphysical self, is not defined by what it accumulates, but by what it radiates. It is the unconditioned core. It is the quality of your attention when nothing is demanded of it is the quiet inner whether you possess, irrespective of the external climate you're currently simulating. The regret that often settles in midlife isn't regret over a single failed career move or a harsh word spoken. It's the low, constant ache of unlived potential. It's the silent realization that in perfecting the protective shell, you accidentally muffled the life force it was meant to protect. The antidote, paradoxically, is not to shatter the mask, which would cause chaos, but to gently loosen its edges. It starts with small acts of recognition, a 5-minute period where you sit and simply feel whatever emotion is present, without labeling it stress or tiredness. A moment where you listen to music that defined you 20 years ago, and feel the ghost of that younger man stirring in the room. That stirring is the weather of the true self. It's the wind of your essential nature. And if you sit very still, allowing the breathing to deepen and slow, you can feel that inner climate returning. You realize that you are not solely defined by the suburban walls you maintain, but by the quiet, sovereign spirit within them. You are the sky, not just the temporary cloud of your current responsibilities. The sky always remembers its own nature, even when covered by the thickest fog. And as that thought settles, allow the tension in your shoulders to dissolve. That tension is the energy used to hold the mask rigid. Let the face relax. Let the weight of the day and the weight of the role slide away. Just for now. Because the original man is waiting for you in the stillness. He's always been here. Now, as we prepare to move into a new quiet space, there is a question about the nature of the world itself. A question about the difference between the structure we see and the deep pulse beneath it. But before we leave this thought behind, there's one more silence worth listening to. The moment where the man you are finally shakes hands with the man you were. Chapter 11. Can the fences of the known be unlocked by the whisper of the unseen? We live in a world defined by its edges. Fences, property lines, quarterly budgets, appointment slots. These boundaries give us comfort. They create the illusion of control and predictability, which, in the harsh light of a demanding life, feels like stability. For the man carrying the weight of the house and the payroll, the known is a necessary fortress. But have you ever felt the subtle, persistent itch that this structure, this known world, is merely a shadow play? That the crisp, clean reality of brick, asphalt, and stock market indices is only the thin veneer over a roaring, living mystery? This feeling often surfaces when you are alone, driving home on an otherwise mundane evening. You look at the endless, identical stretch of houses, the suburban landscape you built your life within, and a sudden, cold thought intrudes. What if none of this is the real story? What if the true current of existence flows just beneath the surface of the neatly manicured lawn, and we are simply deafened by the noise of our own commitments? This is the metaphysical yearning. It's not about ghosts or magic. It's about acknowledging the unseen, the vast, quiet territory that our logic and our 5 senses simply cannot map. The fences of the known are the limits of our perception, defined by what we agree to call real and important. What if that suburban loneliness you sometimes feel, that profound silence that sits beside you on the couch when the TV is off and the family is asleep, is not emptiness, but a signal? What if it's the sheer pressure of the unseen, whispering its existence, trying to crack the shell of your ordinary day. Consider the idea of a universal intelligence, or a collective consciousness. It's a vast, interconnected, energetic sea. Your structured, separate life, your house, your name, your history, is merely one tightly sealed bottle floating upon it. The fence is the glass of the bottle. When you feel lost, without purpose, or trapped, you are often just feeling the desperate urge of the water inside the bottle to rejoin the ocean outside. Your identity, your sense of self, has become too small, too rigidly defined by the space within the fence. How does one unlock these fences? Not with force, but with whisper. The whisper of the unseen is the language of synchronicity, intuition, and deep attention. It is the moment when a random thought pops into your head that solves a long-standing personal problem. It is the way a book falls open to a page that perfectly answers the unspoken question weighing on your chest. It is the quiet feeling of rightness that steers you away from a bad decision, even when the logic screams otherwise. We spend our adult lives training ourselves to ignore the whisper. We call it impractical, inefficient, or subjective. We trust spreadsheets over gut feelings. We trust the proven path over the quiet calling to detour. We traded intuition for certainty. And in doing so, we traded connection for insulation. To re-engage with the unseen is to practice radical presence. It means giving your full, undivided attention to something that offers no immediate payoff, no clear utility. Try this. Look out at the dark sky, or up at the silhouette of a tree outside your window. Look until you stop naming it, stop calling it tree or sky, and just start seeing the immense, irreducible fact of its existence. Feel the sheer energy in its presence. That is the edge of the known blurring. You are connecting to the universal substrate, the energetic field that underlies all matter. In that quiet observation, the world begins to dissolve its fences. You realize the air inside your lungs is the same air flowing outside the window, circulating through the tree, and stretching out into the dark, silent space of the universe. The separation is arbitrary. The connection is fundamental. This is the deeper freedom. It's the realization that even when your career feels like a cage, your essential self, the consciousness that observes the cage, is boundless. The loneliness fades when you understand that you are intrinsically woven into the fabric of everything. The unseen is not a distant, foreign thing. It is the immense, quiet half of your own reality that you simply forgot how to look at. Allow your mind to relax around the edges of what you believe to be real. Let the certainties soften, like wax near a low flame. The structures of your life will still stand tomorrow. But tonight, you can float free of them. Tonight, you can acknowledge that the most profound wisdom often comes not from learning a new fact, but from unlearning an old assumption. Let the whisper find you. It's always there, waiting for the mind to slow down enough to hear the delicate rhythm of the true world beneath the asphalt and the roof tiles. Now, as that thought settles, and the edges of your reality feel just a little softer, we move toward the final and most personal of all metaphysical questions, the one about where our own life is truly happening. But before we leave the idea of the whisper behind, let's consider the most subtle space of all, the one we rarely even notice. Chapter 12 is the space between the second-hand ticks where the unlived life resides. The tyranny of time is the most immediate form of entrapment known to the modern man. You feel it in the early morning rush, the relentless deadlines, the obligation to always be moving forward. Measuring, optimizing. Time, in the way we use it, is a relentless creditor. It forces us to live in two places that don't actually exist: regret, the past, and anxiety, the future. The pain of purpose loss often stems from this trap. We look backward at the list of what we haven't accomplished, or forward at the mountain of what we still must do. We forget the only place where life is actually happening. Now. But let's look closer at the unit of time itself. Feel your breath. Slow and deep. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. Pause. This pause, this silence, is what we're talking about. When you look at a clock, the second hand moves with that familiar, mechanical tick. What interests us tonight is not the tick, but the silent, invisible space between the ticks. The fraction of a second when the movement has stopped, but the next movement has not yet begun. That space, metaphysically, is the pure present. It is the only moment of genuine freedom. The unlived life we feel stirring inside us. The life full of the choices we didn't make, the adventures we bypassed for the sake of prudence, the authentic man we hid behind the mask. It doesn't live in the past. And it can't be found by rushing into the future. It resides in the pure potential of the present moment. Think of the things that brought you peace. True, non-negotiable peace. Was it planning a vacation? Or being completely absorbed in the moment the boat touched the water? Or the first sip of coffee on a quiet Sunday morning? The planning and the memory were time-bound, but the experience was timeless. It happened in the space between the ticks. The feeling of being trapped, in a job you tolerate, a routine that suffocates, or an identity that doesn't fit, is the feeling of being chronically out of sync with the present. You are either dragging the heavy chain of the past, or straining toward the uncertain cliff of the future. You are never fully here. To find the unlived life is not to quit your job or leave your family. It is a much simpler, internal shift. It means taking that raw, unspent energy you used to fuel your past ambitions, and focusing it entirely into the fractional pause of the current moment. The metaphysics of the present state that reality is always unfolding, never finished. If you can locate the tiny space between the second-hand movements, you find the source code of reality. It is where creation is still in process. It is where you can genuinely choose your response to life, rather than merely reacting based on the programmed responses of your past self. This is the moment where purpose is truly found, not as a giant, overarching mission statement, but as a deliberate quality of attention you bring to the next simple task. The quality of attention you bring to the slowing of your own breathing. The kindness you generate, not tomorrow, but in the next second. Try to find that space now. Feel the weight of your body, supported completely by the surface beneath you. Your thoughts may race, but you, the awareness behind the thoughts, are perfectly still. You are suspended in that silent interval. There is no debt here. There is no anxiety here. There is only the vast, quiet potential of the unlived life, now residing right here, waiting to be lived with a new kind of awareness. Let your breathing become the rhythm, and the space between the breaths, the ultimate freedom. The world of structure and pressure can wait for the morning. Tonight, you are drifting in the boundless space of what simply is. The quiet, sovereign self, free of the clock's tyranny, is the only man who can truly rest. Allow the gentle current of these thoughts to carry you, not toward an end, but toward a deeper, more peaceful center. There is nothing left to do now, nothing left to solve, and no greater truth to chase. You have arrived exactly where you need to be. Chapter 13. When the well runs dry, does the silence measure thirst, or the memory of water? The quiet settles around you now, heavier than the stress of the day, but softer too. It's the kind of silence you can finally lean into, away from the hum of the fridge, away from the low-frequency anxiety that seems to vibrate just behind the drywall. You're thinking about the well. Not a literal well, but the one you use to draw from, that deep reserve of purpose, patience, or simple, uncomplicated joy. Maybe it was there in your 20s, when the future was a clean, wide-open road. Maybe it was there when you first held your child, and the whole world suddenly narrowed down to just one perfect, overwhelming commitment. Now, years later, you stand at the lip of the stone wall. When you drop a pebble, there's no splash, only the dull thud of stone hitting stone. The well is dry. And the question is not why it's dry, because we know the reasons. The relentless, unyielding demands of providing, the slow erosion of a personal identity under the weight of roles, the sheer, suburban loneliness of being surrounded by people, yet feeling utterly unknown. The reasons are a spreadsheet of legitimate fatigue. But the metaphysical truth is this: the silence at the bottom of the well measures something more than the immediate thirst. Thirst is the sensation of the present lack. But the silence holds the memory of water. And that memory is what we must listen to. It's the memory of flow. The truth of the matter is that the well, metaphysically speaking, is never truly empty. It simply means the bucket you are using, the vessel of your current daily life, is no longer aligned with the underground stream. The old world taught us that when you feel dry, you have to dig deeper, work harder, push through the grit. This is the language of debt and effort that has trapped you. It's the endless cycle of trying to force a result, trying to re-engineer the joy that used to come naturally. But what if the stream has simply shifted course? What if the problem is not your capacity for life, but your current life's receptivity to the fundamental current of who you are? Think back to the things that brought you ease, not effort. The things that made time disappear. The feeling of the cold steel wrench in your hand as you fixed something. The quiet focus of losing yourself in a book. The unexpected depth of a conversation with a stranger that went far beyond work or weather. Those were moments when your inner bucket was aligned with the deep current. The silence now is telling you that the structure you built, that job you hate but can't leave, that constant low-level tension you live with, that self-imposed vow of silence you maintain at home, these are the clay that has hardened and diverted the flow. The memory of water, that phantom splash in the deep of the well, is the truth of your original design. It's the knowledge that you are not designed to be perpetually dry. That capacity for flow still exists, untouched by the calendar. It exists in the same way that the blueprint for a river exists, even when a drought has reduced it to a trickle. To listen to the silence is to cease the frantic digging and simply stand still. It is to recognize that the greatest regret in midlife is not the career choice, but the gradual, silent agreement to stop expecting wonder. The metaphysical question tonight is whether you will let the memory of flow guide you to the new source, or whether you will remain stuck, endlessly polishing the dry stones of the past. The deepest, truest reality is that the memory is an instruction. It is telling you, turn, change your posture. You are not a vessel that needs refilling. You are a current that needs redirection. You are only stuck because you believe the dry well is the entire landscape. Take a slow breath and let the quiet memory of that deep, cool water settle into the background of your mind. It's still there. But before we leave this thought behind, there's one more silence worth listening to. The silence of the things we refuse to release, even when they break us. Chapter 14. Is the heaviest burden we carry actually the absence of what we were never meant to lift? Let your body sink down a little deeper now. Feel the weight of the blanket, the softness of the pillow. For a moment, let go of the invisible harness you wear, the one that tells you every moment must be productive, every problem must be solved by you. We are talking about burden tonight. Not the kind you can measure, the mortgage, the kids' college fund, the toxic client project, but the metaphysical burden, the stone that feels heavier than it should. In the middle of life, many men find themselves carrying stones that were never meant for their pack. They pick them up out of a sense of duty, or maybe out of the fear of being perceived as weak, or perhaps because they saw no one else picking them up. And they carried them, silently, until the stone fused with the muscle and became identity. The deepest philosophical question about suffering is not why we suffer, but what part of the suffering is self-selected. You've spent decades proving your strength by what you can endure. But the deepest strength lies in discerning what is truly yours to carry, and what is merely a societal or familial expectation, a ghost burden passed down through generations of silent, dutiful men. The absence of what you were never meant to lift is a terrifying concept, because it implies that the relief is not a reward for struggle, but a function of non-action. It suggests that the path to peace is less about adding a new commitment, a hobby, a new job, a second degree, and more about gently putting something down. Imagine standing on a cold beach, and you are exhausted. You are holding a massive, beautifully polished stone. It's heavy. It's impressive. But it is destroying your posture and your peace. And then a small voice, the quietest part of yourself, whispers, "I never asked you to carry that." That stone might be the belief that you must be the perfect image of a successful man. It might be the emotional responsibility for everyone else's happiness. It might be the silent, crushing weight of maintaining a professional image that is completely disconnected from the quiet, simple man you actually are when the office door closes. The burden feels heavy not because it is solid, but because it is hollow. It is the absence of truth in your daily choices. It is the void left when you prioritize the optics of your life over the integrity of your soul. And the emptiness of a thing is always heavier than its mass. It drags you down without offering any real counterweight. This is the central irony of midlife. We feel trapped because we are trying to lift what is not ours to lift, while leaving untouched the singular task that is ours, the quiet, gentle work of self-realization. The universe, in its metaphysical grace, doesn't require you to be a hero in the way the world defines it. It asks you to be authentic. When you shed the phantom weight, when you decide that the family's expectations or the job's demands do not define your core value, you suddenly discover that you have vast, unused energy. That sudden lightness is the space reserved for what you are meant to lift. Perhaps a long-delayed conversation with your child, a return to the one forgotten craft, or simply the daily, quiet task of being truly present for the woman you love. These real burdens are not crushing. They are grounding. They connect you back to the flow. Let the phantom weight slip off your shoulders now. The space it leaves behind is not emptiness. It is room. It is the room you need to stand up straight for the first time in years. Breathe into that new, quiet space behind your chest. It's strange, perhaps a little terrifying, this absence of familiar pain. But before you settle into that lightness, there's one final, crucial perspective we must turn to, the place where all burdens and all sources of water eventually meet. Chapter 15. What secret language does the hour use when it finally stops waiting for the day to end? You know this feeling. The whole day is a series of clocks. The alarm, the traffic countdown, the meeting schedule, the dinner bell, the relentless ticker of work hours until freedom. Life, for so long, has been a state of waiting for the next thing to be over, for the next moment to finally grant you permission to exhale. When the hour is merely a servant to the clock, it uses the language of transaction, effort for payment, time for production. It is a harsh, metallic, transactional language that leaves no room for grace or wonder. But there is a metaphysical hour, a real, deep time that exists only when you stop demanding that the day hurry up and end. This is the secret language we are listening for now, the one that whispers only when your internal noise finally settles. The hour uses the secret language of isness. It speaks through the sensory truths you normally screen out, the way the moonlight actually falls on the windowsill, making the dust motes look like tiny, silent galaxies, the faint, resonant creak of the house settling into its foundation, a sound of profound comfort and safety, the quiet, rhythmic beat of your own heart, a drum that has marched faithfully for decades, unnoticed. The transactional man, the man trapped in job regret and suburban silence, misses this language entirely. He sees the passage of time as a debt to be paid or a resource to be spent. He is always anticipating the next moment, thereby missing the only moment that ever truly exists. But the hour, when it stops waiting, reveals itself as the gateway to the only true and accessible eternity. It is the sudden, startling realization that you are here now, completely, perfectly, irreversibly here. And in that simple recognition, the future stress and the past regrets, the two primary traps of your mind, vanish. They dissolve because they cannot exist in the language of isness. The hour doesn't care about your quarterly earnings or the fight you had 5 years ago. It only cares about the texture of the air on your skin right now. This is not a complicated philosophical trick. It is the practice of gentle, deliberate observation. It is the only place where you can find true self-knowledge, because the authentic self is not defined by achievements or failures. It is defined by presence. The secret language of the hour, when you finally hear it, sounds like this. You are not running out. You are not late. You are not failing. It's a soothing counter-narrative to the panic of midlife, the panic that whispers, "I'm running out of time to find purpose." But if you are fully present, the purpose is baked into the moment. The purpose of this hour is to listen. The purpose of this hour is to rest. The purpose of this hour is simply to be the man who is finally letting go of the control panel, allowing the current to carry him, trusting that the deepest water is the quietest water. Let the last remnants of the day's noise fall away. Let the images of the well, the burden, and the clock dissolve into the darkness. There is only the soft sound of your own breathing now. It is the deepest form of language. It is the sound of the self, finally at peace, finally home, settling into the quiet, perfect truth of the now. There is nothing left to do. The hour is yours. Chapter 16. Is the unexamined life a gift we reject, or just the only true shelter left? They say the hour changes a man, but the truth is, the hour only changes the light he sees by. And tonight, the light is low. You're sitting in the quiet now, aren't you? Maybe in the familiar, heavy chair in the corner of the study, the one that remembers your weight, the one that takes the burden from your shoulders and keeps it for a while. The suburban quiet settles in like dust, thick and insulating. Outside, the night is already holding its breath. The garage door is down, the tools are hung, the engine is cold. The familiar, low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen is the loudest confession in the whole house. This quiet. It's the only time the truth feels safe enough to speak. We've all been told, since the first class we ever walked into, that the unexamined life is not worth living. It's one of those ancient marble statue phrases that sound so noble, so true, that you never dare to question it. It's the constant pressure to know yourself, to find your purpose, to master your circumstances. It's the motor that drives a man out the door every morning, the subtle, high-pitched whine beneath the highway noise, telling him he has to keep seeking, keep analyzing, keep pushing. But what if that relentless examination is less like a key and more like a drill? What if the constant turning, the endless self-criticism, is simply boring deeper into the wound, instead of pulling the splinter out? You look back at the last 20 years. The goals you set, the ladder you climbed, the house you bought, they were all based on a profound belief in the value of examination. You examined the market, you examined the budget, you examined the competitive landscape. You looked at the man you were supposed to be, the one society, or maybe your father, drew on the blueprint, and you spent your life trying to fit the wood to the lines. That was the examined life in action. And yet, here you are, now, when the engine is finally off and the noise has stopped. Do you feel any closer to the center of yourself? Or do you feel like a complex machine you spent decades assembling, only to realize the instruction manual was printed in a language you can't quite read anymore? The truth is, for most of us, the unexamined life isn't a state of ignorance. It's a state of simple, necessary shelter. Think of the moments of genuine, quiet peace you've had in the last few years. Were they the moments spent in intense therapy sessions or deep, self-flagellating analysis? Or were they the 5 minutes you spent in the backyard, watching the way the late afternoon sun hit the leaves, simply allowing the moment to exist without demanding a lesson or a meaning from it? The examined life demands that you be the prosecutor, the judge, and the defendant, all at once, every single night. It demands that you constantly ask, did I do enough? Did I choose correctly? Was this path worth the mileage? The unexamined life, the one that feels so forbidden to the successful, serious man, merely asks you to be. It asks you to rest your hand on the cold stone wall, feel the coolness, and accept that for this moment, the wall is simply a wall, and you are simply a man. Imagine the sailor who has spent 20 years charting every current, every rock, every unpredictable swell of the sea. He has filled notebooks with meticulous data, terrified of being caught unaware. He is the master of the examined life. But he can never simply look at the ocean and see beauty. He only sees a complex equation he is constantly solving, and his heart is always in his throat. Then there is the quiet fisherman who simply knows the water. He feels the shift in the air, the way the boat leans, the specific, rare scent of the coming weather. He doesn't examine it. He trusts it. He lives in a state of unexamined connection. His knowledge is not academic. It is intimate. And that is the core betrayal of the examined life we were sold. It taught us to value the map over the territory, the definition over the experience, the analysis over the simple, profound feeling of being here. When you look back at that job regret, that suburban loneliness, that feeling of being trapped, they were all built within a framework of rigorous examination. You chose the path that looked best on paper, the one that survived the most stringent cost-benefit analysis. You chose the option that the logical, examined mind dictated. But somewhere, in the dark, quiet space of your soul, a small, unexamined voice was whispering, "That is not where the song is." We were taught that the opposite of examination is stupidity, but the opposite of examination is surrender. Not the kind of surrender that means giving up, but the kind that means letting go of the reins. It is the profound peace of simply being the passenger for a while, allowing the current to take you, and trusting that the water knows the shore better than your desperate paddling ever could. The gift of the unexamined life is its presence. It doesn't demand that you justify the moment. It just lets you occupy it fully. Think of the stress you carry. It's the constant, low-grade fever of the self-analyst. It's the fear that if you stop looking, if you stop accounting for every variable, the whole fragile structure will collapse. The silence you keep in your home, the inability to confess the quiet chaos in your chest. It's the silence of a man terrified of saying the wrong thing, of being judged by the relentless internal critic. But what if you allowed that critic to simply step away from the podium? What if you told that obsessive, examining part of your mind, "Thank you for your service, but I have the watch tonight"? What happens to the soul that never learns this quiet shelter? It spends its whole existence on the outside of its own life, nose pressed to the glass, constantly taking notes, constantly recording data, but never once stepping inside to feel the warmth of the fire. It becomes a meticulous, detailed biography of a life that was never actually lived, only studied. The true purpose of philosophy, the deep metaphysics we whisper about tonight, isn't to create more complicated questions. It's to lead us back to the place where the questions dissolve. It's the moment you stop analyzing the purpose of the rain and simply feel the cold wetness on your face. That moment is pure. It is unexamined. And it is, perhaps, the only true moment of freedom you will ever find. Tonight, don't look for answers. Don't worry about the blueprint or the plan. Just listen to the quiet. Let the man who carries the burdens step aside for a while. Let the man who simply exists take his place. Allow yourself the shelter of not knowing. Allow yourself the gift of being. just for this hour. But before we leave this thought behind, this quiet invitation to simply be, there's one more silence worth listening to, a silence that hides not in the absence of sound, but in the heart of our most familiar, necessary spaces. Chapter 17. If the void whispers in your garage, is it asking for the man you are, or the man you hid? The garage, isn't it? It's the sanctuary, the confessional booth of the American man. It smells of dust, cold concrete, old oil, and the slow, metallic decay of things that have served their purpose and now wait. It's where the power tools live, the extension cords are coiled like sleeping snakes, and where the remnants of the man you were before the job, before the mortgage, still collect dust on a high shelf. It's the one space in the house that wasn't designed for guests. It's functional, rugged, and profoundly honest. And it's in that space, or maybe the quiet, low-lit basement, or the porch swing at 2 a.m., that you finally hear it. That low, almost imperceptible hum that isn't electrical, isn't structural. It's the sound of the void. Now, we're not talking about a theatrical, dramatic void. We're talking about the one that sneaks up on you after the kids are asleep and the final email has been sent. It's the quiet, vast, empty space that exists inside the feeling of being trapped. You feel trapped not because the walls are closing in, but because the life you built leaves no open air for the man who built it. And the void, the real metaphysical void, isn't nothingness. It is the space of pure possibility. It's the place where the rules you live by, the budget, the KPIs, the social obligations, simply don't apply. It is the clean slate, the blank page. And when you sit with it, alone, maybe nursing a cold beer, it asks a question. It doesn't ask, "Why are you unhappy?" That's an easy, therapeutic question. It asks, with the weight of absolute silence, "Who are you holding back?" 4 years you have presented the man you are, the provider, the problem solver, the dependable anchor. He's the one who gets the promotion, who fixes the leaky faucet, who sits through the parent-teacher conference with the right expression. He is a necessary and functional self. He is the man the world asks for. But the void, the cold, unblinking space in the garage, is looking past that man. It's looking for the man you hid. Where is he? He's the one who wanted to learn the cello, or write the novel that was too pretentious for the bestseller list, or buy the old, beat-up motorcycle and just go, without a destination or a timeline. He's the one who remembers the smell of the damp earth after a rainstorm and feels a wave of profound, meaningless joy. He's the one who understands that your job title is just a temporary costume, and not your permanent skin. The man you hid is the source of your purpose loss, because he is the purpose itself. He is the well you sealed over because the water was too deep, too clear, and too embarrassing to drink in front of others. The suburban loneliness we talk about, it's not the absence of people. It's the absence of the authentic self in the presence of others. You are lonely because the man you are has nothing to say to the man you hid, and so, you have nothing truly honest to say to anyone else either. You speak the language of mortgages and yard work, and the true, deeper dialect of your soul remains unspoken, unheard, and therefore alone. This is the great metaphysical transaction of midlife. We trade the man we hid for the man we are, believing the latter offers safety, security, and approval. And it does. It builds the cage, but a very comfortable cage. And the void whispers, not in judgment, but in pure geometric neutrality, "I need the man you hid." Why? Because the man you are is a finite solution. He has limits. He needs rules, structure, and approval to function. He is predictable. He is easily broken when the external forces change. But the man you hid, the one who is still messy, still dreaming, still fundamentally unresolved, he is the one connected to the infinite. He holds the raw, untamed energy that built the life you are now trying to escape. He holds the forgotten identity. The void isn't asking you to throw away your life. It's asking you to reintegrate the missing piece. It's asking you to let the two men, the functional provider and the messy dreamer, finally have a conversation. It's asking you to turn the light on in the hidden corner of the garage and acknowledge the forgotten, dusty sculpture of the self you abandoned. Listen closely to the things that make you intensely, privately sad, or intensely, privately joyful. Those emotions are the voice of the man you hid, speaking through the silence. The stress you carry is the physical tension of two selves trying to occupy the same space without ever looking at one another. We fear the void because we mistake it for death. But it is not. The void is the space between the words, the silence between the heartbeats, the pure, empty canvas of creation. It is where the universe is still deciding what to become next. And if you allow yourself to sit in it, to answer the whispered question, to bring the man you hid back into the light of the man you are, the feeling of being trapped dissolves. Not because the circumstances change, but because you are no longer a prisoner of a single, narrow identity. You become whole. The true tragedy of the man who never listens to the void is that he is buried twice, once when he dies, and once when he chooses to permanently hide the only true self he had. He becomes a beautifully functional, perfectly preserved artifact in a comfortable suburban museum, a thing to be observed, but never again a living, breathing creator. Tonight, when you feel the familiar ache, don't reach for the distraction. Reach for the silence. Let the void speak. It's not a threat. It's an invitation to finally come home. Who are you holding back? Allow that question to settle into the quiet corners of your mind, like the cold air beneath the door. Chapter 18. Does the long shadow of responsibility follow us, or does it precede us, waiting for the light to fade? The night deepens now. The air is still, and the final thoughts of the day, those necessary administrative worries like the bills, the schedule, the small, nagging slights, have begun to recede, thankfully. They go back to their appointed folders in the mind, ready for the morning. But there is one thing that rarely recedes. One weight that seems to grow heavier the more you try to set it down. Responsibility. It feels like a shadow, doesn't it? Long, low-slung, and absolute. It is the silent partner in every decision you make, the unwritten clause in every contract you sign, whether it's a mortgage or a marriage vow. It is the cornerstone of the man we are, the very definition of a mature life. We are taught that responsibility is a thing that follows us. It is the necessary consequence of our choices, the karmic debt incurred by action. You made the choice, now carry the weight. And so, we live our lives constantly looking over our shoulder at this long, low shadow. We are careful, we are measured, we are stressed. We are terrified of the shadow catching up, of the past decision finally delivering its full, crushing interest. The anxiety you feel is often just the sound of the shadow's footsteps getting closer. But what if we have misread the nature of the shadow itself? What if responsibility doesn't follow us at all? What if it precedes us? Imagine a vast, empty field at sunset. The light is dying, and your own shadow stretches out far ahead of you, becoming an enormous, distorted, almost mythic figure. It doesn't trace your steps. It points the way forward. Responsibility, in the profound metaphysical sense, is not a consequence. It is an obligation to the future. It is the shape of the man that is needed down the path, the man that the future is waiting for you to become. The family stress, the feeling of being trapped, those aren't just burdens. They are the future's fierce, desperate hands reaching back through the darkness to pull you forward. They are the shape of your unfulfilled potential for care, for presence, for quiet, unshakable strength. When you feel the weight of responsibility, You feel the pressure of the future self pressing back against the current, inadequate self. The job you regret, the ladder you climbed, the life you are now tired of. You took responsibility for those things because they were presented as the required steps to get to an imagined future of safety and peace. You carried the heavy pack of the present to feed the shadow of the future. But what if the future doesn't need your current burdens? What if the long shadow ahead is not a taskmaster, but a vision? The shadow that precedes you is asking for a change in orientation. You have been looking at the light source, your own past choices, and watching the shadow follow. Tonight, let the light go. Turn your gaze to the shadow itself, stretched out in the dim. What is the shape of the man in that shadow? He is not defined by his debt, his budget, or his mistakes. He is defined by his capacity. His shadow is simply the measurement of how much light he can block out for the sake of those behind him. It is the size of his protection, the breadth of his commitment. The quiet suffering of many mature men is the result of spending their lives trying to fulfill the responsibilities that follow them, while neglecting the responsibilities that precede them. They are so busy cleaning up the mess of the past that they have no energy left to embody the quiet nobility of the future. The responsibility that truly matters is not the maintenance of the life you have, but the creation of the self you will need to be in the next moment. If you carry the burdens of the past, job regret, silence, identity loss, you move slowly, heavily. The shadow that follows is small and precise, a constant reminder of the failure to live up to the expectations you set long ago. But if you embrace the responsibility that precedes you, the obligation to be more present, more honest, more yourself, you move with an entirely different kind of gravity. You move with purpose. The shadow ahead of you becomes massive, commanding, a path to walk into. It is the difference between debt and destiny. This quiet moment tonight, this pause before sleep, is not just a rest. It is a moment of metaphysical realignment. Let the shadow that follows, the mistakes, the regrets, the small, anxious failures, dissolve into the gloom. Focus only on the long, low shadow ahead. It is waiting for you to step into it. It is waiting for the light to finally fade enough so that only its shape remains. That shape is the man you are responsible for becoming. Do not look at the shape of the shadow and see an obligation to toil. See an obligation to rest, so that you can meet it with fresh eyes. See an obligation to forgive the man you were, so that the man you are to become can finally be free of the anchor. The shadow that precedes us is the final responsibility, the obligation to step fully, completely, and without apology into the only future we truly have, the one that exists only in the mind, only in the heart, and only in the quiet wisdom of the deepest night. Let the light go. Let the shadow lead. You are not trapped. You are simply on the threshold of the next, larger version of yourself. Chapter 19. Do we only find the true weight of our existence in the spaces where logic fails to breathe? Have you ever sat alone in the deep hush of your house, long after the last door has closed, and felt a strange, quiet certainty settle over you? It's not a thought you can easily explain, and certainly not one you'd share at the office water cooler. It's the feeling that the four walls holding up your suburban life, the mortgage, the routine, the constant hum of the engine, are somehow less real than the silence vibrating just beyond them. This is where the grand, old questions begin, not in a lecture hall, but right here, in the dim glow of the kitchen light after midnight. We spend our days building a fortress of logic, measurement, and observable facts. We rely on the dependable world. 2 + 2 is equal to 4. The sun rises in the east. The stock market opens at 9. It's a comfortable structure, a warm, predictable cage we've chosen for ourselves, believing it grants us control. But every man in the middle of his life knows the ache of that cage. He knows the slow burn of job regret, the feeling of being trapped by a predictable salary, his worth measured by a title and an annual review. He knows the hollow echo of suburban loneliness, the way the distance between his house and the next is less about geography, and more about the silence he keeps inside, afraid to burden the neighbor who seems just as burdened himself. And it's in that precise moment of exhaustion, when the control slips away, maybe during a crisis with a child, or simply while staring into the reflection of the dark windowpane, that the true weight of things shifts. Logic, which served as the sturdy floor, simply dissolves. It can't calculate purpose. It can't resolve family stress. It certainly can't tell you who you truly are, beyond the roles you play. The metaphysician whispers that the most profound truths reside in the cracks of our carefully constructed reality. They live in the moments where causality breaks down, where synchronicity taps you gently on the shoulder, where you instinctively know something is true even though you lack the data to prove it. Think of those rare times when you felt truly, completely present. It wasn't during a performance review or a home improvement project. It was likely a quiet moment, the smell of rain hitting hot asphalt, the sight of your son sleeping, or the simple, rare feeling of a perfect, unhurried morning coffee. In those spaces, the linear timeline of stress and duty stops. The man who feels trapped suddenly remembers that the walls are only as real as his attention makes them. The weight of existence, then, isn't found in the accumulation of duties, but in the spaciousness of letting go. It is in the willingness to acknowledge the vast, unwritten script of reality that plays out beyond the edges of your personal ledger. It's the unsettling, yet intensely liberating, thought that your deepest self may be less about the man who earned the paycheck and more about the man who sits silently, watching the fireflies outside, suddenly aware that his own tiny light is part of something infinite and unseen. We resist this space because it asks us to shed our armor. Logic is a great shield against the terrifying, boundless ocean of the unknown. It keeps us anchored to the belief that if we just plan hard enough, organize enough, and work enough, the outcome is guaranteed. But the soul grows weary of guarantees. It yearns for the sublime, for the mystery that cannot be contained by a spreadsheet. To step into the illogical is not to become irrational. It is to become whole. It is to accept that the very structure of your inner life, your intuition, your dreams, your sudden flashes of insight, operates by a different, deeper set of rules. It is to confess, like a man talking to his reflection in a dark, quiet garage, that perhaps the life you planned meticulously is far less important than the life that chose you, the life that only reveals itself when you stop trying so hard to steer. The true substance of your being is found in the weightless air of possibility, not in the granite certainty of what you already know. But before we leave this thought behind, this quiet invitation to the edge of the known, there's one more silence worth listening to, a silence that hides not in the world, but in the very foundation of the man listening. Chapter 20. If the man is the map, does the journey end when he stops listening for the voice that drew the coastline? There is a particular kind of exhaustion that settles upon a man in his 40s and 50s. It's not just the physical weariness of long days, but the deep spiritual fatigue of having been his own atlas for too long. He drew the map of his life, the career path, the financial goals, the perfect family portrait, and he's followed it with relentless, admirable, yet ultimately silent dedication. But look closer at that map. Is it truly your design, or the tracing of a design handed down to you by your father, by society, by the ceaseless, nagging advertisements for what a successful man ought to look like? The quiet crisis of purpose loss often begins when a man realizes the destination he's been driving toward for decades doesn't actually exist on his own true compass. He arrives only to find the silence there is deafening. The ancient thinkers understood that the self is not a fixed, concrete thing. It is a constantly redrawing map, a vessel both steering and being steered, and the coastline is the boundary between the inner man and the outer world. But what happens when the man, focused entirely on the road beneath his tires, forgets the hand that first sketched the outline of his potential? That voice is often the first thing to go in the din of midlife pains. It is the inner authority, the intuitive sense of rightness that guided the younger man, the one who made choices based on passion, not prudence, on curiosity, not quarterly earnings. That voice, which felt so close then, has been muffled by compromise, by the thick cotton of stress, and the convenient, comfortable habit of intellectual silence, the refusal to ask hard questions because the answers might be inconvenient. We fear that voice because it speaks the language of undoing. It tells you the life you built might be wrong. It asks you why you stopped painting, why you haven't picked up that old guitar, why you still haven't said the simple, necessary truth to the person who needs to hear it. It challenges the carefully constructed identity of the responsible, stable, silent provider. When you allow yourself to listen, the metaphysician's principle becomes a personal truth. The universe, or God, or simply the animating impulse of your own deepest self, is a constant, subtle source of instruction. It drew your original coastline, a unique shape of desires, talents, and limits. But the day-to-day man, distracted by the noise of maintenance and defense, substitutes that divine blueprint for a corporate one. The danger isn't failure. The danger is the journey ending because the traveler has become deaf to his own internal cartographer. The feeling trapped is not a geographical problem. It is an auditory one. The walls of your life feel solid because you stopped listening for the gentle invitation to walk through the doors you didn't even know were there. The man who is only listening to the engine noise, the constant demands, the grinding routine, will eventually only hear the sound of his own going nowhere. The soul, in its quiet wisdom, never stops speaking. It communicates through the language of feeling, the deep disquiet that says, "This isn't all there is," or the sudden, inexplicable joy that flashes in a simple moment, showing you exactly where your true energy flows. To recover the map is a quiet act of defiance against the mundane. It requires you to sit in that profound silence, not to solve a problem, but simply to exist without agenda, and wait for the subtle, original tone to re-emerge. It is an intimate conversation, a confession made to no one but your oldest self, the one who knew the destination before the road was paved. The journey only truly ends when you no longer recognize the original sound of your own name, when the man who drew the coastline has become a stranger to the man who walks the shore. And yet, even the map, once recovered, can be misleading. There is a greater field, a truth that underlies the very act of drawing, a question that lingers like smoke on the air, after the fire has gone out. Chapter 21. Does the world hold a hidden reserve of meaning, or do we only ever witness the echo of our own willingness to see? Think about the sheer, overwhelming complexity of the world outside your window, the precise angle of the moon, the impossible mathematics of a single pine cone, the vast, untold history of the ground beneath your feet. We are surrounded by a symphony of exquisite design, yet we often reduce it to utility. The ground is for building, the moon for tides, the pine cone is just fuel for the fire pit. The life of a working man often demands this reduction. To manage the stress and complexity of work and family, you must filter, narrow, and label everything. This is a tool. This is a deadline. This is a task. The world becomes a vast, categorized inventory, and in this necessary, but ultimately stifling, process, the feeling of wonder, the vital juice of the spirit, slowly drains away. The fear of the middle-aged man is often that the great mysteries have been solved, that the magic is reserved for the young, and that the only remaining purpose is to manage the predictable decline. He struggles with suburban loneliness not because people are absent, but because the shared, deeper language, the unspoken acknowledgement of the magnificent absurdity of existence, has been lost in favor of discussing roof shingles and retirement portfolios. Metaphysics suggests that meaning is not a quality inherent in the object, but a luminous interaction between the observer and the observed. It states that the universe is not a mute, fixed mechanism waiting to be catalogued, but a dynamic partner that responds to the depth of your attention. The world doesn't hold meaning like a secret vault. It is meaning, and it simply waits for your active willingness to see. Consider the simple act of looking at a tree. The functional man sees lumber, shade, or something to trim. The man willing to see its hidden reserve, however, sees the patient wisdom of seasons, the history of every storm it has weathered, the silent, slow-motion struggle toward the light. He sees himself reflected in its long, quiet endurance. This act of seeing is a surrender, a brief, quiet cessation of judgment and utility, and it opens a channel to the deeper well. This is the great, quiet challenge. The man who feels that his life has grown small, thin, and brittle must understand that the boundary of his world is drawn not by circumstance, but by the circumference of his own attention. If he only looks for regret or a sense of being trapped, the world will dutifully present him with evidence to support that feeling. It will echo his own emptiness back to him. But if, just for a moment, he allows himself to hold the quiet, radical thought that the world is a benevolent co-conspirator, waiting for him to simply change the question, everything shifts. The solution to family stress might not be in solving a problem, but in viewing the difficulty as a shared, necessary crucible. The lack of purpose might not be a failure of finding, but a failure of seeing the profound, quiet purpose already inherent in the simple act of enduring, loving, and providing. The final metaphysical whisper is this: the quiet, luminous secrets of the universe are not hidden from us, but hidden by our insistence on treating them as ordinary. The true journey of a man is to slowly, deliberately, and with great intimacy, take the common stone of his life and hold it until he sees, not the greyness of the rock, but the impossible, fiery chaos that forged it. When you look for the mystery looks back. When you stop demanding answers and simply choose to witness, the world confesses its own magnificence. The heavy silence in your garage is not empty. It is merely waiting for you to fill it with the sound of your own wonder. It is waiting for you to see. Chapter 22. What part of the soul remains undocumented by the deed to the house? It's late. The kind of late where the streetlights outside have lost their ambition, settling into a dull, amber haze that only serves to make the shadows deeper. You're sitting here, maybe in the worn leather chair, the house settling around you like a great, quiet animal. You can hear the hum of the refrigerator, a faint, metallic drone that reminds you of how much energy it takes just to keep things cold, to preserve the temporary. But listen closer, past the house noise, past the faint echo of a day that was too long and too loud. There's a silence that doesn't feel empty, but heavy. It's the weight of what the house knows about you, and what it doesn't. You've spent years trading hours for timber, for plaster, for the neat, predictable lines of a suburban block. You've acquired the deed, the blueprints, the insurance policy that guarantees the structure. You know the property lines down to the inch. You know the wattage of every bulb, the cycle of the lawn sprinkler. You can account for everything that is here. But what about the space in the house that refuses to be documented? What about the acreage of the soul that never showed up in the closing papers? We live in a world that demands a paper trail for everything important: birth, marriage, debt, ownership, death. Everything is logged, filed, quantified. The value of a man, by many metrics, is the sum of his quantifiable assets: the equity in the walls, the title to the car, the balance in the account. This house, right now, represents stability. It represents the successful execution of the plan. And yet, sitting here in the quiet, do you feel stable? Or do you feel like a ghost rattling around in an incredibly expensive cage? That feeling, that quiet, insistent friction, is where the metaphysics of the common man begins. It's the moment you realize that the man who signed the mortgage is not the full man. He's just the proxy. Think about the life you poured into these rooms. The years are not etched into the walls, but into the space between the walls. The forum terror you wrestled down in the kitchen when the stress finally broke your sleep. The silent, almost panicked inventory you took of your life in the driveway before getting out of the car, trying to remember who you were supposed to be when you walked inside. These moments, the moments of pure, unscripted being, are not fixtures. They are not structural. They are the undayed territory. They are the soul's private estate, and it has no address, no zip code, and no market value. This is the great deception of midlife. We confuse preservation with presence. We believe that by accumulating solid, tangible things, we are accumulating a solid, tangible self. But the house is only a container, and containers are often built to keep things out as much as they are to hold things in. What have you kept out? Perhaps you kept out the recklessness, the wild, uncalculating dreamer you were before the first paycheck, before the first commitment. He's still here, you know. He's the faint scent of rebellion that catches you sometimes when you open a long-forgotten box in the garage. He is the part of you that knows, instinctively, that the only true, non-depreciating asset you possess is the quality of your own awareness. The deed is a document of surrender. It proves you have agreed to play by the rules of gravity and commerce. It is a necessary document. But the soul's document, that part remains blank, waiting for you to write the description. It's a quiet challenge, to find the dimensions of your own self that cannot be sold, cannot be mortgaged, cannot be lost to inflation or market crash. Consider the silence in this room. The house is quiet, yes, but the silence inside you is different. The house's silence is the absence of noise. Your silence is the presence of an immense, private knowing. It's the knowledge that, behind the facade of the respectable man, there is a whole geography that remains untouched by the obligations of the week. We spend so much time maintaining the structure, painting the exterior, fixing the roof, that we forget to tend to the interior climate of the undocumented self. The inner man, the one who never wanted to climb the ladder, only to know what the view looked like from the very top of his own head. That man is waiting for an invitation, a gesture that says, "I see you, and I know you don't belong to the house." The philosopher says the map is not the territory. In your life, the mortgage is not the man. The job title is not the soul. And the deed to the house, while holding the power to define your debt, has no power to define your destiny. Your destiny is kept in a vault only you possess, a place where the currency is not dollars, but pure, unadulterated choice. The choice to step out of the blueprint, even just for a few breaths, and remember the size of the sky before it was framed by the windows of this room. The house can wait. The man who truly owns the house is not the one on the deed, but the one who can sit in its silence and feel absolutely, irrevocably free. Let the knowledge settle now, that the most valuable possession you have is the one you will never be asked to prove. It exists only because you choose to recognize it, a deep, silent, undocumented current running beneath the floorboards of your life. Before we leave this thought behind, this quiet rebellion against the measurable world, there is a question about the nature of truth itself, a truth that often hides not in the answers we find, but in the path we refuse to take. Chapter 23. Can the real answer to the question be found only in the sincerity of the unasked? The first question left us here, in the quiet ownership of the soul, separate from the things we own. Now, let's step outside, or at least to the window, where the night is a vast, unwritten script. Look out there. The world is full of questions. Every news cycle, every corporate meeting, every anxious conversation at the dinner table is a storm of questions demanding immediate answers. How do we fix this? What should we buy? Where did we go wrong? We are conditioned to be solvers, to attack the problem, to apply the algorithm, to achieve the necessary outcome. We believe that competence is defined by the speed and precision of our reply. The unexamined life, for the American man, is often just the inability to produce the right answer in time. But let's talk about the unasked question. This is not the question you avoid out of fear, or the one you suppress out of politeness. The unasked question is the one so foundational, so deeply rooted in the architecture of your being, that it has become the very air you breathe. It's the question whose shadow is so large that it defines the shape of your entire existence. It is sincere because it is unavoidable. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a great, quiet lake. The surface is still, reflecting the stars with perfect clarity. If you shout a question, "What is my purpose?" you only disturb the water, and the answer comes back as a distorted, meaningless echo. The unasked question doesn't need a voice. It's the subtle, constant vibration in the sternum, the quiet ache that tells you the engine is running, but you haven't checked the destination coordinates in years. It might be something like, "Did I mistake the map for the journey?" Or, "If I stop performing, will anyone still see me?" Or, most quietly, "Is this all there is, or did I simply stop looking?" These are the questions that cannot be articulated in the boardroom or the therapist's office, because the vocabulary of those spaces is too small for them. They are too immense, too fragile, to be forced into the neat box of a sentence. The sincerity lies in the fact that your entire life is an attempt to answer it without having to say it out loud. The long hours at work, they are a desperate, sincere answer to the unasked question of worth. The silence you keep in the face of conflict, that is a protective, sincere answer to the unasked question of identity. The constant, low-grade anxiety about money, about the future, about the kids, that is a sincere, overwhelming answer to the unasked question of control. We build our lives as monuments to the answers we think are required, believing that if the monument is tall enough, the original question will simply be obscured. But the unasked question is relentless. It operates on a different logic, a deeper, slower frequency. Consider the ancient principle of koans, paradoxical statements meant to be contemplated. The answer to a koan is never logical. It is a moment of pure, non-verbal realization. The universe is full of koans, and the unasked question is your personal koan. It's the riddle that doesn't need to be solved, but dissolved. How do you find the answer? You stop looking for it in the places where sound lives. You stop trying to articulate it. You sink into the sincerity of the feeling the question generates. Sit with the low-grade anxiety not as a problem to be fixed, but as a messenger. That feeling is the sincere answer. It's telling you, you are not fully here. You are petitioned. The truth of the unasked question is that the answer is not a piece of information, but a change in state. When you stop trying to wrestle the answer into a logical sentence, when you stop trying to solve the problem of your own existence, you create a vacuum. The water stills, and in that stillness, the sincerity of the question, its raw, unfiltered essence, is all that remains. And what happens then? The question itself is revealed to be not a lack, but a guide. It points to the territory you have avoided. It says, "Go here." The path is not well maintained, but it is real. The real answer, the one that alters your axis, is a quiet unfolding. It's the realization that the man you have become, the careful, measured, successful man, is only one possible outcome of the life you started. And the unasked question is the gentle, philosophical key to unlocking the others. It is a profound act of courage to let a question remain unasked, and yet hold its pressure against your heart. It means accepting uncertainty as the native language of the soul. It means trusting that the true north of your being is defined not by the answers you boast of, but by the quiet, unutterable hunger of the questions you live by. Rest in the sincerity of that mystery now. Let the unasked question be a warm stone in your hand, a quiet companion in the dark. And as the air grows stiller around us, there is one last piece of the night's puzzle that needs to be turned over, a paradox that explains why we search for connection, even when the world seems to thrive on separation. Chapter 24. If the great engine of the world runs on paradox, is our loneliness just the sound of alignment? We've moved from the visible documents of the self to the silent truth of the unasked question. Now, let's consider the nature of the machine itself, the great, sprawling engine we call the world, the universe, existence. Look at your life. What is the most reliable constant? Stress, debt, time passing too fast? Perhaps. But beneath those surface currents, there is a deeper, more fundamental mechanism: paradox. The engine of reality does not run on straight lines and simple equations. It runs on two contradictory truths being equally, fiercely valid at the same time. Think about it. You must be completely present, yet everything is fleeting. You must be entirely committed to your path, yet you must hold it lightly. The maximum freedom is found only when you submit to a greater discipline. The world is a magnificent contradiction. We are individuals, fiercely separate, yet every breath we take is shared. Every atom in our body was forged in a star we will never visit. We fight for permanence, knowing that change is the only law. And this brings us back to the quiet, familiar ache in the center of your chest. Loneliness. We frame loneliness as a lack, a symptom of failure. A failure to connect. A failure to belong. A failure to speak the right language at the right time. We treat it like a low-fuel light on the dashboard of the soul, a problem to be solved with more company, more noise, more activity. But what if your loneliness is not a failure of connection, but a profound success of alignment? What if that feeling of being utterly, singularly alone in the dark is the sound of your own consciousness perfectly aligning with the deepest paradox of existence? You are, after all, a single, separate wave trying to comprehend that it is also the entire ocean. That is a paradox so vast it generates a sound, and that sound, in the quiet human heart, is loneliness. Imagine a single, finely tuned gear in a massive, cosmic clockwork. It is designed to spin on its own axis, independent of every other gear. But its singular, perfect motion is what allows the entire mechanism to tell time. If that gear stopped spinning alone, if it tried to fuse with the gear next to it, the whole system would seize up. The loneliness of that gear is its functional integrity. Your loneliness is the sound of your integrity. It's the moment when the noise of the crowd falls away, and you hear the pure, uninterrupted frequency of your own unique being. This can be terrifying. In the suburbs, we crave connection, but we also crave silence. The high fence, the closed garage door. We crave the space to be ourselves, but we fear what will happen when we actually get it. When we realize that the space we crave is not just for rest, but for an overwhelming, quiet confrontation with our own singularity. But paradox offers a release. If the world runs on paradox, then your intense loneliness is inseparable from your intense potential for connection. They are two sides of the same coin, and you cannot feel the weight of one without having the substance of the other. The mistake is trying to eliminate the loneliness. You cannot eliminate the paradox. You can only learn to hear its song differently. Listen to the silence of this late hour. If you stop fighting the loneliness, if you simply allow it to be a pure, unjudged state, what does it become? It becomes presence. It becomes awareness. It becomes the deep, grounding knowledge that you are here, now, awake to the vastness. And from this singular, aligned point of integrity, you can genuinely, honestly connect with the world. Not out of need, but out of fullness. The paradox of all meaningful relationships is this: you can only truly meet another soul when you have fully embraced the distance between you. The loneliness is the distance. It is not a barrier, but the respectful, necessary space where two whole people can stand without collapsing into each other. It's the vacuum that allows the signal to travel. So, let the quiet ache settle into your bones, not as a wound, but as a resonant frequency. The sound of alignment. The sound of a man who is finally listening to the engine of his own life, and realizing that the hum he mistook for emptiness is actually the subtle, profound thrum of his own, irreplaceable existence within a boundless, contradictory universe. You are here, entirely yourself, and that is exactly where you need to be. The quiet light of the night is yours now. Rest easy in the knowing that the great truths are not always comfortable, but they are always a pathway home. Chapter 25. When the mirror finally cracks, does the reflected man become the original? The hour is late. A soft, heavy blanket of quiet settled over the house. You can hear the low, distant hum of the world, maybe the last fan running downstairs, or maybe just the rhythm of your own pulse slowing down. Everything you know, the deadlines, the commute, the mortgage statement resting somewhere on the kitchen counter, it all seems to be holding its breath right now. And in this silence, a simple question surfaces. Something we don't dare ask in the daylight, when the light is too sharp and the answers too practical. Tonight, let's talk about the man in the mirror. Not the one you shave or the one you straighten your tie for, but the image you carry around inside your head, the reflection of the self you've been working to maintain for decades. It's a heavy thing, this reflection. It's built from 1,000 tiny judgments. The promotion you took, the house you bought, the words you held back, the debts you paid, the debts you didn't. It's the image of stability, of control, of the capable man who has the answers, or at least the tools to build them. But sometimes, when the light hits it just right, or when you've had one too many nights staring at the ceiling, you realize something. You realize that the man in the mirror is built not just of what is true, but of what is necessary. He is the necessary fiction that allows the rest of the world to continue spinning smoothly. He is the anchor, the suburban fortress, the rock that everyone else leans on. And the original man, the one you used to be, the one who dreamed of something louder, something less organized, where did he go? He didn't go anywhere. He's just been waiting on the other side of the glass. The glass, in this case, is the highly polished, meticulously maintained surface of your identity. It's not a lie. It's a strategy, the survival mechanism of a soul trying to navigate the demands of a complex life. We learn early on to build a facade that can withstand the weather, to create an appearance of seamlessness even when the foundations are creaking. The weight of this performance is what leads to that quiet, deep ache you feel sometimes when you're alone in the garage. The radio off. Just staring at the lawnmower. It's the loneliness of the man who can't take his armor off. The metaphysics of this is simple. Which is the real entity, the thing casting the reflection, or the reflection itself? The Greek philosophers would talk about the eidos, the true form, versus the perceived copy. For you, the copy, the reflection, is the reliable husband, the effective manager, the steady hand. It's the role you've learned to play so well that the audience, your family, your co-workers, even yourself, has forgotten it's a play. But the eidos, the true form, the man beneath the polished surface, he's still restless. He's the one who misses the feeling of pure, purposeless freedom. He's the one who knows what he settled for. And then, one day, the mirror cracks. It might be something minor, a comment from a child that cuts too close, a sudden illness that reminds you of your own fragility, or the stark, silent realization that the next 20 years look exactly like the last 20. The crack isn't a disaster. It's a relief. It's the first fault line in the highly pressurized vessel of your maintained self. When that crack appears, the reflection shatters. It doesn't disappear. It breaks into sharp, jagged pieces. And in the space between those pieces, the original man, the authentic, unguarded, perhaps slightly flawed and certainly less polished self, can finally begin to bleed through. The man who was once trapped behind the glass now steps through it. This is the moment of inversion. The thing you thought was real, the reflection, is suddenly seen for what it was, a perfect two-dimensional rendering. And the thing you'd hidden, the complex, three-dimensional, deeply human man with all his uncertainties, begins to take the stage when the mirror cracks, the reflected man, the one built on obligation and expectation, dissolves. And the original, the one made of pure wanting and quiet, earned wisdom, finally becomes visible. It's terrifying because it means letting go of control. That's the hardest thing for a man in your position. You've built your life on the bedrock of control. Control of the budget, control of your emotions, control of the narrative. To allow the original self to emerge is to admit vulnerability. It's a confession that you don't actually know everything, that you're just as lost and hopeful as you were 20 years ago. Only now with heavier responsibilities. But it's also the key to unlocking that deep sense of being trapped. You feel trapped not by the walls of your home or the spreadsheets on your desk, but by the walls of your own reflection. The moment the glass shatters, the walls come down. You realize that your value was never tied to your performance, but to your presence. The man who is reflected is judged by his accomplishments. The original man is simply there, complete in his own quiet gravity. In this moment of profound honesty, in the gentle dark where no one can see you, listen for the sound of the original self breathing. It's a softer, slower sound than the frantic pulse of the reflected man who is always chasing the next goal. This is the sound of a deep, elemental belonging. You don't belong to the job, or the expectation, or the role. You belong to yourself. The crack in the glass is not a sign of breakdown, it's a sign of breakthrough. The reflection is gone, and what remains is not an empty space, but the first true glimpse of the original self finally coming home. You no longer need to pretend the glass is perfect, because now you are standing on your own 2 feet, no longer needing to rely on a copy for definition. But before we leave this thought behind, there's one more silence worth listening to. We've talked about the past and the present self, but what of the future? We build and build, always looking ahead. But who is really funding that journey? Is that forward motion a matter of expansion, or simply an obligation? Chapter 26. Is the unspoken promise of tomorrow a debt to the future, or a confession to the past? Lean back a little deeper now. The stillness of the house is almost absolute. Think about tomorrow. It's a word that carries so much weight for you. Tomorrow holds the next meeting, the next repair, the next chance to get it right. It's the repository for all the things that couldn't be finished today. The deferred phone calls, the half-written emails, the conversations that were too complicated for the dinner table. Tomorrow is your projected self, a highly optimized, fully capable version of the man you are right now. But beneath all that planning, all that structure, lies the true metaphysical weight of tomorrow. It is, essentially, a promise. You are promising something to the future. You are promising success, security, stability, peace. And you feel that promise like a physical weight on your chest, the quiet pressure of not disappointing the man you hope to be. The question is, who is the real creditor in this transaction? Is this drive, this relentless forward momentum, actually a debt you owe to the future, a necessary payment for the life you hope to build for your family and yourself? Or is it something far more intimate, far more complex, a quiet confession to the past? Imagine the past as a dimly lit room behind you. In that room are the younger versions of yourself, the ambitious 20-year-old, the confused college graduate, the eager, slightly reckless new father. They are all watching, and they are all, in their own silent ways, judging. They are the architects of the life you are living now, but they were also the ones who made the pivotal mistakes, the choices that, in retrospect, seem naive or rushed. When you push hard for success today, the extra hours, the swallowed pride, the endless pursuit of accumulation, it feels like you are paying a debt to the future, ensuring that your children won't have the struggles you had, that your retirement is secure. But look closer. Does the drive come from pure optimism, or does it come from a deep, unspoken need to justify the path you've already taken? Perhaps the unspoken promise of tomorrow is actually a retroactive attempt to smooth out the rough edges of yesterday. It's the desperate need to prove to the younger self that the sacrifices were worth it, that the big compromises, the career move that took you far from home, the passion project you abandoned, the words you never said to the people you loved, were necessary steps toward this current, fortified life. The goal tomorrow is not just to succeed, but to retroactively validate the choices of the past. It's a confession that says, I know I gave up that dream, but look, the house is paid for. I know I missed that moment, but look, we are safe now. This creates a paradox. The very act of living fully in the present, of finding peace in the now, is sabotaged by the need to continuously placate two ghosts, the fear of the future and the regret of the past. The philosopher Immanuel Kant spoke about treating humanity, whether in your own person or in that of any other, always as an end, never merely as a means. But are you treating your present self as an end, or are you merely a means to justify the decisions of the man you used to be? When you feel that suburban loneliness, that dull ache of feeling trapped, it often stems from this debt cycle. You feel trapped because you are living not for the light that exists right now, but for a theoretical illumination somewhere down the road. You're trading a tangible, present peace for an uncertain, future security. And the currency you are paying with is the most valuable one you possess, your current, unrepeatable moment of being. To break the cycle, you have to acknowledge the past not as a creditor, but as a map. It's done. The choices are made. You can't go back and edit the narrative, but you can stop using the present as a sacrifice to absolve the choices you regret. The only debt that truly matters is the one you owe to the man you are right now. The debt to show up, fully and authentically, for this moment. The unspoken promise of tomorrow should not be a burden of atonement. It should be a quiet, earned expectation that whatever comes, you will meet it with wisdom, not fear. When you look forward, try to see the landscape not as a series of necessary checkpoints, but as an open field. The future is not a lockbox of required deliverables. It's an empty canvas. And the colors you choose to paint with, the words you choose to speak, are a confession only to your own sincere desire for wholeness. You are no longer trying to prove anything to the past. You are simply showing up for the only moment you actually possess, which is right here, right now, in the stillness. We started with the self and moved through the nature of time and obligation. But both of those ideas ultimately bring us to a central feeling, the quiet, sometimes overwhelming magnitude of sorrow and struggle. We often feel that our personal pain is so great that it must take up all the space in the room. But what if that feeling of smallness, that pressure of sadness, isn't a limitation, but an opening? Chapter 27. Does the universe shrink to fit our sorrow, or does sorrow finally open us to the infinite? The deepest parts of the night, like this one, are often the heaviest. When the distractions fade, when the last text has been sent, and the house falls silent, what remains is the simple, honest weight of being. And for many men, this weight can be distilled into a quiet, enduring sorrow. It may not be loud grief. It's more like a low-grade hum of disappointment, the things you thought you'd achieve, the man you thought you'd become, the ease you thought you'd find. We tend to treat this sorrow as an intrusion, a problem to be solved, medicated, or simply ignored, until we can get busy again. But metaphysically, sorrow is one of the most powerful states of human being. It's not an absence of feeling. It's an overwhelming presence of feeling, so dense that it seems to occupy all the available space in our consciousness. It feels like the universe has shrunk down to fit perfectly inside the cage of our own sadness, that the entire vastness of existence is now limited by the circumference of our own pain. This is the common trap of the feeling man, the belief that his personal suffering is the center of the world. The pain of the unfulfilled dream, the worry over the bank account, the exhaustion of the struggle. It feels total, absolute. We build fences around this feeling, convinced that the world must contract to meet the size of our crisis. But here is the beautiful inversion, the subtle truth whispered by the greatest minds. Sorrow, precisely because it feels so total, is the one thing that can shatter our carefully constructed boundary between the self and the infinite. Think of it like this. When you are happy, your consciousness is expansive, but often shallow. You are moving through the world. When you are suffering, your consciousness contracts and becomes incredibly deep. You stop moving. You are forced into a singular point of profound, excruciating awareness. In that moment of absolute stillness, when the struggle is too great to ignore, and too vast to simply solve, you are finally open to the full scale of existence. The moment you admit, truly and deeply, that your struggle is too big for you to handle, that it goes beyond the practical, beyond the logical fix, is the moment your own ego's defenses crumble. The sorrow stops being a cage and becomes a magnifying glass, pointed toward the boundary of the self. And as you stare into it, you realize that the source of the pain is not simply the problem itself, but the isolation you've built around it. That feeling of being trapped, that sense of suburban loneliness, it's not a defect. It's the quiet scream of the soul recognizing its own profound connection to a reality far larger than the one confined by four walls. Your pain is not unique in its existence, only in its expression. It is the human condition distilled. And the moment you recognize that your sorrow is not singular, but universal, the universe stops shrinking to fit your sadness, and your sadness finally opens you to the infinite human experience. This shift, this philosophical turning point, is what allows wisdom to settle in. You realize that the magnitude of your feeling is a precise measurement of your capacity for love and connection. The depth of your sorrow is equal to the height of your potential for joy. It is the proof that you are connected to every other soul who has ever sat awake in the quiet dark, feeling the same immense, untranslatable weight. So, when the ache comes, when the disappointment settles like a fine dust, don't try to fight it or minimize it. Instead, use it as an anchor. Let it draw you down, not out. Allow the pain to quiet the demanding voice of the ego, the voice that says, "I must be the only one struggling this way." In that silence, you will find a vast, echoing chamber, and in that chamber, you will hear the deep, steady rhythm of the world's great, continuous, and unending heart. You are not shrinking. You are expanding. Your sorrow is the price of admission to a deeper, richer understanding of what it means to be alive, to be connected, to be a single, fragile, and magnificent piece of an endless whole. The door to the infinite is often found not through a grand, illuminated archway, but through the small, dark aperture of your deepest, most honest feeling. Rest in that knowledge. You are exactly where you need to be. Chapter 28. When we finally stop building fences, does the horizon become a shelter or a warning? It is late now. The kind of late where the silence outside is no longer merely the absence of sound, but an actual presence, a heavy, dark velvet draped over the suburban street. You might be sitting in the worn leather of your favorite chair, or maybe you're just staring up at the ceiling, where the streetlights can't quite reach. For a moment, the world you built, the solid, predictable world, seems to soften at the edges. This feeling, this quiet slipping of the familiar, is often the first whisper of metaphysics. It's not about textbook definitions or grand theories, but it is about the moment you realize the blueprint you've been living by, the one with the clear property lines and the numbered pages, might not have been the only one available. You've spent decades, maybe, building fences. Fences around your time, around your career, around your family, and most dangerously, around your own potential. Each post driven deep, each wire strung tight. A definition of this is mine, and this is where I stop. We do this, of course, out of a profound need for safety. The world, after all, feels vast and indifferent. To be a man means to stand against that vastness and carve out a small, manageable kingdom. But somewhere in the late middle of the journey, after the mortgage is settled and the children are grown enough to barely need you, you realize you are also trapped within your own meticulously constructed borders. You look out past the familiar hedges. The horizon is still there, endless, blurring the line between earth and sky. And you have to ask, when we finally stop building these fences, does that open horizon become a shelter from the noise of the shoulds, or does it become a stark warning of the emptiness we've held at bay? Think of the energy, the sheer, tireless energy it took to maintain the wall, the daily diligence, the quiet sacrifice of authenticity required to stay within the lines of a defined role, the provider, the boss, the stoic husband. Each label, while conferring stability, also acts as a fence post, limiting the field of movement for the actual self inside. You become defined by what you don't let in and what you don't let out. The metaphysical journey begins when you grow weary of this maintenance. It's when the silence in your garage, after a long day of performing the role, feels heavier than the noise of the office. You are alone with the tools, the forgotten projects, and the knowledge that the weight on your shoulders isn't just responsibility. It's the cost of keeping the fences standing. The world outside the fence is the world of unconstrained possibility, often simply called the real. It's where the boundaries dissolve, where your identity is no longer tied to your job title or your zip code, but to the sheer, unquantifiable fact of your existence. This is terrifying because it means losing the comfortable cage of certainty. You might feel a subtle, aching regret for the detours you never took, the passions you silenced because they didn't fit inside the neat property lines of the responsible man. This regret isn't a failure. It's the quiet sound of the soul finally noticing the horizon. It's the soul asking, "Why did I accept a fence when the whole sky was offered?" The shelter, then, isn't found in tearing down the fence violently, but in acknowledging its artifice. The greatest shelter is realizing that the boundaries were always psychological, never real. The pressure you feel, the trap of suburban loneliness, the stress of the career climb, is often just the pressure of a self trying to fit its vast, cosmic reality into a small, domestic container. When the fence comes down, the horizon rushes in. It brings with it the vastness of your own interior life, a landscape you neglected while you were busy maintaining the exterior. At first, it is a warning. IT warns you that you are smaller and larger than you ever believed, smaller than the titles you chased, larger than the house you bought. But if you stay still, if you allow the silence to truly settle, the horizon becomes the greatest shelter. It is the place where you can finally stand without a label, without a goal, and just be. It is the sanctuary where your value isn't measured by a ledger or a paycheck, but by the simple, enduring fact that you are an irreversible, unique expression of the universe. The fence was the warning. The limitless view is the truth. The relief is in recognizing that nothing essential was ever contained by the wood and wire. The man was always bigger than the boundaries of his life. But before we leave this thought behind, there's one more shadow worth watching. Because the self that steps beyond the fence is no longer defined by the light of the sun. It is defined by the deeper, more ancient measure of time itself. Chapter 29. Does the world possess a secret, or is the secret only the weight of our attention? The silence in the room deepens. Maybe you hear the softest creak of the house settling, the wood and drywall sighing under the weight of the night and the memories held within. It's a reminder that even the most inert objects seem to have a kind of quiet history, a slow, deliberate life happening just beneath our notice. This brings us to a peculiar kind of loneliness, the one that grips a man who has achieved success but feels like a stranger in his own life. The world he inhabits is supposed to be solid, meaningful, rewarding, yet it often feels translucent, as if the real substance of existence is happening just behind the visible curtain. This is the feeling that the world holds a secret, a hidden reserve of purpose, a vital code known only to those who have the key. And you, the man caught in the routine, feel perpetually locked out. We spend our days hunting for facts, stock prices, quarterly reports, the best way to fix the leaky faucet. Facts are tangible. They can be measured, documented, and controlled. But a secret is different. A secret is not a missing fact. It's a living truth that reveals itself only when the conditions are right, usually when the inner and outer noise finally subsides. Think back to the great, unspoken question of midlife. Is this it? This isn't a cynical question. It's a metaphysical one. It's the soul knocking against the walls of the defined life, asking if the true essence of things is contained within the transaction of labor for currency, or if there's something far more rare and irreplaceable. We look outward, convinced the missing ingredient is out there. A better job, a different partner, a move to the coast. We are convinced the secret is possessed by the world. But what if the entire dynamic is inverted? What if the secret isn't a possession, but an emanation? What if the secret of the world is only the weight, the sheer, focused intensity of our own attention? Imagine a piece of music you only half listen to while driving. It's pleasant background noise. But when you sit in the dark, close your eyes, and allow every note to pass through you, the music stops being a series of sounds and becomes a world. The notes haven't changed, but your attention has. It's the weight of that attention that transforms noise into revelation. This is the metaphysical mechanism. The world doesn't withhold meaning. We withhold our presence. We live in a state of perpetually divided attention, checking the phone during dinner, rehearsing a conversation in the shower, worrying about tomorrow while staring at today. We are always one step removed, treating reality as a problem to be solved, not a moment to be inhabited. The secret is not hidden in the world. It is generated by the fully engaged man. When a man slows down, truly slows down, not just relaxing, but focusing the full oceanic weight of his consciousness onto the simple act of breathing, or the texture of the old wood grain on his desk, or the complex, silent reality of his sleeping son, the world suddenly seems to glow. The air feels charged. The ordinary becomes profound. This transformation is the core of ancient wisdom. The true self is not the seeking self, but the self that is simply seeing. The ache of purposelessness, the fog of suburban sameness, these are not defects in the universe. They are the symptoms of a man whose attention is too diffuse, too scattered by the demands of a life lived externally. If you carry the weight of your full, mature attention, you no longer look for the secret. You become the one who reveals it. The universe doesn't have a hidden drawer full of meaning. It is only a mirror, reflecting the depth of the man who dares to look into it without distraction. The quiet wonder you seek is not a destination. It is the quality of the journey you are already on, seen through unburdened eyes. We are terrified to give our full attention because it means being fully vulnerable, fully present. It means we can no longer hide in the busyness of chasing facts. But the profound irony is this: the moment we stop searching for the secret, which is the sheer, astonishing reality of the present moment, begins to speak to us. And its voice is not a booming command, but a soft, calming whisper. It simply says, "You are here." That is enough. And yet, this act of pure attention brings us to the deepest question of all. Because if our focused awareness illuminates the present, what happens to the man who exists only as a collection of echoes, reflections, and unmade intentions? What becomes of the man whose identity is entirely dependent on the light that is reflected back? Chapter 30. If the self is just the sum of all its mirrors, what is the nature of the man who casts no reflection? It's almost the deepest part of the night now. The darkness seems to press in, making the boundaries of the room feel indistinct, as if the walls are softening into the space around them. This is the hour when the mind, deprived of the daylight's sharp logic, begins to speak in symbols. For much of our lives, especially for men in the middle of their journey, the self is a function of reflection. We are defined by the mirrors we look into, the appraisal of the boss, the admiration of a client, the approval of a family member, the expectations of the neighborhood. We build an identity that is, in essence, a flawless curation of what others expect to see. The man you present at the boardroom table is a mirror. The man you present at the parent-teacher conference is another. And often, these reflections are so polished, so practiced, that they become the primary reality. The self becomes the sum of its public surfaces. The metaphysical concern here is not moral, but existential. If your identity is only a collection of reflections, where is the original man? Where is the source that generates the image? This is the core pain of feeling trapped or losing purpose. It's the realization that the life you built is perfect for the reflection, but suffocating for the man standing behind it. The man who is tired of the performance. We feel a profound, silent exhaustion because maintaining so many perfect reflections is an impossible labor. We are constantly adjusting the angle, dimming the light, and polishing the glass to ensure the image remains stable. But in the late, quiet hours, when the audience is asleep and the mirrors are dark, the man who cast the reflection is left standing alone in the dark. And this is where we ask the final, quiet question. If the self is only the sum of all its mirrors, what is the nature of the man who casts no reflection? This is not a question of existence, but of authenticity. The man who casts no reflection is not the man who is invisible. He is the man who has achieved an inner singularity. He is the self who is no longer dependent on the light of external approval to validate his form. He becomes, in a deeply philosophical sense, his own light source. To cast no reflection is to stop reacting to the mirrors. It means that what you do is done from an inner necessity, an intrinsic truth, rather than an external expectation. It means the work you pursue, the silence you keep, the decisions you make, they all spring from a deep, non-negotiable understanding of who you are, unconcerned with how the world receives the image. This is the great, terrifying freedom. When you cast no reflection, you may initially feel a strange, disorienting emptiness, like stepping off a moving train. The anchors of external identity, the compliments, the criticisms, the defined roles, all cease to hold their power. But this emptiness is the space where your true nature can finally expand. The nature of the man who casts no reflection is his source self. He is defined by his origin, not his consequences. He is the creak of the old study chair, the worn leather, the quiet truth of gravity and endurance. He is the quiet acceptance of his own complex weather, the storm and the calm, the success and the failure, without needing to present only the sunny forecast to the world. This quiet, unreflected self is the bedrock of true peace. It's the realization that the burden of choice only feels like stone when the choice is made for an audience. When the choice is made solely for the man standing in the dark, it becomes lightweight, almost instinctive. This is the man who has nothing left to prove to the mirrors. In this deep, metaphysical stillness, you can finally feel the enduring truth. Your worth was never in the reflection, but in the simple, continuous act of casting a light. The man who casts no reflection is the man who has finally come home, to a place where the light is interior, and the only witness required is the quiet, calm truth of his own breathing. And as the dark holds you now, let the mirrors fade. Let the quiet truth of your own presence be the most valuable, rarest thing in the world. Rest now in that quiet singularity. If this story left something unspoken inside you, follow that feeling. It'll lead you back here, where every truth waits to be dreamt again.